All right. Nobody here yet, but we'll give it a second or two. Hopefully everything's coming through. Sound and picture looks okay. But so tonight, if you don't already know, we're going to go through my entire discovery file from my 2016 rape case. Now, I'm going to remove these glasses because, as you can see, there's a glare, right? And it's going to be a little bit tough for me to to read some of the things, but I think I'll get through it. My eyesight isn't so horrible that I can't see the screen, but it does make it a little bit blurry. But I want you to be able to see my eyes. That's going to be important for me. Again, I'm doing this one because it's something that I've wanted to do for years. I've wanted to put this entire story out there, right? I've wanted to put the facts out and let people decide. But until last year, when the Emerson video went viral, I didn't have a platform that really would have reached anybody. Um, Here we are. How's it going, DG? Here we are. What are we? That was July, so 10 months removed from the Emerson video, from my first viral quote unquote video. I have a little bit of a platform, 5,500 subscribers, and I got a lot of haters. The odd video was covered by a few of the quote unquote troll channels, um, who I hope show up tonight in full force. Now, I'm going to be sharing with you not only my entire discovery packet, but handwritten notes and we're going to start with the handwritten note. So while I was in jail, after I got my discovery file, which is your evidence packet showing everything that the state supposedly has against you, uh, I went through it page by page, obviously, sitting in my cell. Um, I went through it page by page dozens of times over. I didn't get it for maybe the first 6 months. So in a little over a year and a half, I probably went through it at least 15 or 20 times, just rereading everything. And I made handwritten notes. Now, actually, when I share the screen with you, what you're going to see is two. DG, let me know if everything's coming through. Okay, you're the only one that said anything so far, but so far as sound and video, if you don't mind. Uh, Again, so I have two separate sets of handwritten notes that I did while I was in jail, basically breaking down inconsistencies. Thank you, sir, ma'am, whoever. I'm sorry, I don't know you, but I appreciate you. So again, two separate sets of handwritten notes. One set was given to one, my first public defender, essentially, after I fired my paid attorney. And then after he retired, before my case went to trial, they gave me another public defender, and I didn't know that the handwritten notes, the first set, was passed on to that one. So I decided, when I got the new public defender, the last attorney, my trial attorney, the one that actually went to trial with me, that I rewrote everything back out again. So not only am I going to show you, and we're going to start with the handwritten notes, I'm going to give you, I'm basically going to start with her story. I'm going to tell you essentially what her story was. We're going to look at my handwritten notes, and we're going to go through that. Then we're going to go page by page, from the first page to the last page of the entire discovery packet. And the reason I want to go through the handwritten notes first is because I want you to be able to refer back to them as we get to certain things. As we read through these narratives of the story that she told, I want you to already have in mind the inconsistencies, so that it's easier for you to pick up on them and see them as we go through this. First off, on a totally separate topic, I want to cover just real quick. If you're not familiar with Georgia Transparency and J-Town Press, and I don't know how many views this will get as far as live or after the fact, but I just want to bring attention to the unlawful arrest of J-Town Press in Marshall County, Alabama, If you haven't seen those videos, go to J-Town Press, go to Georgia Transparency, and watch Lieutenant Tom Sorrell absolutely violate their constitutional rights. If you haven't redressed your grievances on that issue, if you haven't seen that issue, if you don't know who they are, definitely go check them out. Go check out that issue. It's a horrible situation that happened, and I'm hoping that enough people redress their government with that situation that that lieutenant has been stripped of his badge. So I wanted to get that out of the way because it's kind of been weighing on me for the last few days that I've been looking multiple times over the incident that happened with GT and J-Town Press. Yeah. So basically, let's start with this. If you don't know who I am, my name is North Georgia Audit, but my real name is Shane Keyros, Keyros. I hide from nothing. Okay, my name has been public essentially since my maybe second, auditing video. In the Emerson videos, the few videos that I did on Corporal Emerson, who I helped to get fired from his job here in the city that I live in Commerce, Georgia. I said my name in one of the videos when I first spoke to the Lieutenant Holly here in Commerce about the Emerson incident. So I've never hidden my name, but it wasn't until the odd video, which is one of my most recent quote unquote viral videos, that this whole thing came out. And again, it's never something. If you read my community post that talked about this live that I posted last night, I've never hid this situation from anybody since the first day that I was accused. When I was in jail, I didn't hide it from the other inmates. The other inmates knew exactly what I was in there for. Since my acquittal, I haven't hidden it. I haven't hidden it from people that I've dated. I haven't hidden it from employers. My current employer, who I've been with for a while now, and I love my job. They know. People there that I work with know about this situation. Some of them may believe that maybe it's possible that it happened. I don't know what everybody feels. I know that they haven't gone through my discovery file like we're about to. Very few people actually have, and I've never kept it from anybody, but it's not something that I just go around waving and saying, "Hey, will you look at this?" It's my wife has seen it. My mother, obviously, some friends have gone through it. Anybody that's ever wanted to look through it, I've passed it to them straight up. Here you go. Straight up from day one to us. I've looked. It's public record. It's absolutely public record. So the only editing that has been done on this, and shout out to my wife for taking the time to go through the 106 pages. I edited out the victim's last name and her family member's last name, which is the same as her last name, and some addresses and phone numbers and things like that. Everything else is going to be completely there. I'm hiding nothing. I'm essentially, I'm going to present this. KTZ, hello. Essentially, I'm going to present this. Not only, like I said, not only the full discovery file, but also my handwritten notes. 2 sets of handwritten notes. Now, the first set of handwritten notes that we'll go through, I'll go through basically piece by piece. And in the page one, here it says page 6, page 7, page 14. That's not necessarily going to correlate with the discovery file that we're looking at, but it correlates with the pages. It definitely addresses everything in there. It's just the discovery file that I had when I was in jail had numbers on the bottom right corner, right? That was my copy, which I had handwritten all over, which is why I'm not using it, right? Because it looks horrible. It has handwritten. So this is the copy that was given to me by my trial lawyer after my acquittal, after I was found not guilty. So this is a fresh copy. Again, the only editing that's been done on it is to remove her last name. I didn't have to remove last names. This is all public record. The only reason I'm doing that, the girl that accused me is in her 20s now. The only reason, and I battled back and forth on whether I wanted to list her last name or not, whether I wanted to block it out, because hey, I was put on blast, right? Like my entire history is out there. So Why shouldn't she, especially since I know for a fact that she lied? The reason I chose to help hide her identity by blocking out the last names um, was because no matter that she lied, even though that she lied, uh, there was still something wrong with her, right? She was going through whatever she was going through, and we'll get into it on what I believe the reason was, but I believe it was, you know, the the absence of her parents in her life. She had her grandmother. That's the only person that she had that cared about her, that took care of her, that loved her. Her mom and dad, neither one were there for her. But we'll cross those bridges as we come to them. So before I start sharing the screens and we get into the handwritten notes, like I said, if you just came in, I'm going to go through the handwritten notes first. I'll go through the first set of handwritten notes basically, and we'll read them together. The second, then there's a diagram of the house that I drew where she says everybody was in the house, where they were supposed to have been, where it's supposed to have taken place. And then there's a second set of essentially the same thing. Those second set of handwritten notes, I'm going to go through a little bit faster, mainly because they say the same thing. But basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll through that second set, and enough to where if you want to pause it and later, come back to this video and compare what I said in that second set of handwritten notes to what I said in the first set of handwritten notes, that it's going to be identical, right? Even though I didn't have this first set of notes when I wrote the second set of notes. So essentially everything's it's all going to line up. In the second set of notes, there might even be more points that I make and more inconsistencies that I point out. One thing I do want to mention, look, I'm going to read words as they are printed. So you're going to hear words like rape. You're going to hear words like child molestation. You're going to hear, even though these details and even though this story is absolutely fabricated, there still might be some triggers in here for people that may have gone through or have family members that gone through something like this and that really happened to them. I want to make people aware. This stream might not be for you. Again, the details are absolutely fabricated, but they to an extent, a few of them may seem a little gory. But my channel isn't monetized, so I'm not afraid. It could be. I choose not to. So I'm not afraid to use these words. I'm not going to use code words. We're going to talk about this as it was written. We're going to talk about this as it was gone through and displayed to the jury. We're going to say these words. We're going to get into the supposed details of this accusation. So first, before I share the screen, I'm going to give you just a brief, quick synopsis of her story. Now, keep in mind from the beginning, she only ever told this story one time until we got to trial. And at trial, she kind of told the same story, but many details were different or new. Personally, in my opinion, when she took the stand at trial, I believe that she did what she could to help me get found not guilty without admitting that she lied. That's my personal belief. I could be wrong about that. I don't know. But even my lawyer said it was strange how she was combative with the district attorney during her testimony and seemed more comfortable when my lawyer was questioning her. But the trial is a different thing. We'll kind of talk about the trial. I'll mention some things. I don't have the trial transcript. That is like a $4,000 or $5,000 thing if I want to get that. I will tell you some things about the trial, and you can take me at face value or you're not. I don't care. But the fact is, it's public record that I was found not guilty. The deliberations lasted between 15 and 30 minutes, and here we sit today. I'm a free man with zero criminal history other than an underage DUI when I was 19, and I blew a .023, so I wasn't even drunk. L3, good to see you. How's it going? So again, I'm going to go ahead and start with the story she told. Just a brief, quick footnote, not footnote, but cliff note of the story she told. Essentially, she says that one night, my fiance at the time, my daughter's mother, and I were smoking. And now we smoked outside. So essentially what she's saying is we were outside smoking. We come inside. as she's going to her bedroom, which is straight down the hallway from the front door. You'll see the diagram of the house. Um, she says, I followed her as we came inside. She says, I followed her to her room. And as she entered her room, that I hit her in the back of the head, knocked her unconscious. When she awoke, her clothes were off, my pants were down, and that I raped her to the point that I came to completion inside of her. Um, at times, she said that nothing came out of her. Less than an hour after she told the story, and again, the only time she ever told this story, one time, less than an hour after she says that nothing came out of her, she says that she bled a little. So there's very many inconsistencies, but that's basically her story in a nutshell. Was that not only was my wife and I coming inside from smoking, and I directly followed her to her room, that my wife was awake with my daughter, and at one point she says that we just came in, I followed her to her room. Later she says that my wife and my daughter were in our bedroom, which if she was not unconscious, but the last thing she remembers is us coming in through the door. How could she say where they were? But she also said that her mom and her mom's boyfriend, who was my fiance, I keep saying my wife, I'm sorry, that was my fiance at the time, my daughter's mother. She says that her uncle and the quote unquote victim's mother were in a bedroom which was less than 15 feet away from where she says this happened at. Then she says that my fiance at the time's dad was in his bedroom, which is directly on the other side of the wall. So she puts 4 adults and my 2-year-old daughter within 20, 25 feet is the furthest person away from where I knocked her out, supposedly knocked her out and raped her violently, and nobody heard a thing. Now, the only person, there's 2 people that were supposedly in the house that testified at trial. Her mother, who basically didn't give anything of substance other than she was a bad mom, and that I'd never done or said anything inappropriate that she knew of. And then my fiance at the time, who we split up while I was in jail. I was in jail for 2 years and 2 months. You know, life goes by for people on the outside, and it stops for people on the inside. So, yeah, our relationship didn't make it to the lockup process, but she still came to my trial, testified on my behalf. She had just gotten married like a month before, and still came and did what she was supposed to do because it was the right thing. She's never doubted my innocence in this case, not once. While we were still together before I was arrested, and we kind of found out that I was being accused of this, not while I was in jail, not after we split up, not since. So she has never once said that she thinks that this happened, and she testified on my behalf. So now that you have the basically the Cliff Note story, we're going to start going through this page by page. Like I said, we're going to start with my first set of handwritten notes. The second set of handwritten notes, I'm going to go through a little faster. You can pause it later if you want to compare them back to these or whatever. They essentially say the same thing. Then we'll get into the files. Let me go ahead and share this screen. Here we go. I know my handwriting, like the pens in jail. I don't know. Some people may have been to jail, but the pens they give you in jail, they're basically just the ink tube, right? And they're like that long, and they have the head of the pen. So my handwriting is pretty sloppy, but if you can't see it, let me see if I can zoom it in a little bit. I'm technologically R-worded. I don't mean rape. I mean retarded, which I didn't want to say, but I did anyway. So I don't know how to zoom it in. I should have did this already. I've been preparing for this, for hours. I'll just read it. Maybe you can see it. Maybe you can't. So essentially, page 6, in this summary, Detective Langley says Lillian, who was the quote unquote victim's name. We're only going to do first name. We're not going to do her last name. Lillian was taken to the hospital on September 23rd of 2015. But in Shirley, who was her grandmother's statement, in Shirley's statement, who had custody of her at the time that the accusations were made, Lillian's grandmother, refer to page 20, just in quotes. Again, these aren't exactly going to correlate, but we'll get to each and every one of these pages that I'm talking about. In Shirley's statement, she says she took Lillian to the hospital on September 30th. So Detective Langley says she went to the hospital a week before Shirley says she went to the hospital. It's just an example of again how I put in here of this investigation was poorly conducted. It's just one example, right? There's going to be many examples of not only poor investigation, but also just evidence that looks that points to my innocence. Mom's hearing is even better. Sorry, I don't want to get distracted with comments, but I also don't want to ignore you guys. We're going to keep going through this. So also on this same page, again, I know that this is, you're not seeing these pages yet. You will see these pages. And this is just so you can, once we get to these pages, you can think back and say, oh yeah, she did say this. Oh yeah, that did, get mentioned. So B, another thing that I found in Detective Langley's summary on this page was that it mentions that Lillian told a social worker that she had been raped. It doesn't say she told the social worker that I raped her. Also, there is no statement from that social worker. In fact, this is the only mention of this social worker that she supposedly told. Now, no social worker ever took the stand in my case. A sexual assault nurse took the stand, and the forensic interviewer that did the interview with Lillian took the stand in my case. This social worker that she supposedly told never took the stand. In fact, the detectives in my case never took the stand, and we'll get to that. Page 7, Detective Langley, the lead detective on this case, never took the stand. She took the stand at my arraignment and my bond hearing, but in my trial, never took the stand. So the next page I had an issue with, Detective Langley mentions the home being under investigation by DFACS. It was Erin, Lillian's mother, who was under investigation by DFACS. This was due to Lillian telling her grandmother that her mom was neglecting her, abusing prescription pills, not buying food for her, and did not have her in school at the time. The DFACS social worker came to the house and interviewed everyone except for Erin, Lillian's mother. No mention of sexual or physical abuse was ever made. Lillian was removed from the home before the social worker came, and Lillian never returned. I never saw her again before when she left and went to her grandmother's. All this was approximately 2 months after she later, more than a year, says she was raped. She says the rape occurred in June or July of 2014. DFAC's investigation into her and her mother was in August of 2014. So DFACS comes, sits down with us and talks about all these things that she told her grandmother about her mother. Her mom is neglecting her. That was true. Her mom was abusing prescription pills. Absolutely true. Not buying food for her. Again, that was true. And didn't have her in school. And it was like August, right? So she was supposed to have been enrolled in school at the time. All of these things that she went and told her grandmother were true. We sat down with the social worker from DFACS. Our child, who lived in the same house, there was no case involved with me or my fiance at the time or my child. There was only a case with Erin and Lillian, right? And again, this DFACS investigation was 2 months after she's supposed to have been raped. Now, mind you, she doesn't make this outcry for more than another year until November 2015, September 2015, November. We'll get to it. I forget some of the dates, right? But we'll absolutely see them all. But no mention of this was ever made. Now, if she was scared of me, I never saw her again when she went and told her grandmother all these things about her mother. If she's supposed to have been raped at this time, she had no reason to fear. I had no idea where her grandmother lived. I had no idea where she was. So, and you may say, well, maybe she just didn't want to talk about it. That's true. Cool. I'll give you that. But this is just another situation, like a very serious situation. Everybody except for her mother, who avoided this DFACS worker at all costs. I think we talked to the DFACS worker 2 or 3 times. She came to our house looking for the mom after we had already spoke to her. So you got to think there's a DFACS investigation 2 months after she's supposed to have been raped. I've never seen her. Like, I haven't seen her in weeks before this DFACS worker shows up to our house. And she never mentions anything about being raped. On to the next page I had an issue with. Here it says Lillian's medication was changed. This was from one of the doctors that was communicating with Detective Langley. while she was in the psychiatric hospital, because she was. I guess I should touch on that a little bit, even though we'll get into it. These accusations came. She was cutting herself. Her grandmother. She was acting out. Her grandmother had her committed to a psychiatric ward. Went back to get some clothes for her, and found her diary. In her diary, which we'll also read the few pages that are in here, she says that she was raped, among other things. Never says who raped her, but she does say she was raped. Her grandmother takes that to her at the mental hospital. They confront her with a couple of days after it was found, and then it even takes a little while for her to actually name somebody, me. Um, so she was in a mental hospital when these accusations, this story was told. And again, keep in mind, this story was only ever told one time. You'll see like three narratives that are written by the detective, by the forensic interviewer, and by uh, the sexual assault nurse. But the story was only ever told once. And the story was told a month after the initial outcry. So they didn't sit her down for this forensic interview until a month after she said that she was raped. They found the diary. She says that she was raped, and then she said, I raped her. So she had over a month. I believe it was like 36 or 37 days that she had from the time that she says I was raped by Shane to the point to where they sit her down and have a interview, and she tells this story. And she didn't really tell the story in the DVD interview, which that's the only thing I don't have from my discovery file, right? Is the DVD recorded interview. I have attempted multiple times to get that through open records request from the DA's office in Clayton County. I still have the emails from two years ago where I sent the open records request. They responded that they were received, but that was it. And I've contacted them multiple times in between. I've been shot from this person to that person. But essentially, that DVD interview did not play into the jury at all. They, she doesn't tell the story. They bring it out of her. And of course, I'm sure that even with cases that are true in situations like this, I'm sure that the forensic interviewer typically asks leading questions. But the entire forensic interview where she told the story, the one time that she told the story until we get to trial, everything was a leading question. Like she had few word answers. Like there was the interviewer talked way more than she did. And you'll see in one part of this, she did cry at the end. The interviewer steps out to make a phone call to Detective Langley. Lillian cries a little bit, and I've only seen this DVD one time, and that was at trial. So they wouldn't let me have a DVD in my cell, so that's why I didn't have it in my original discovery pack. But the only time I've ever watched this was when it was played at trial. It wasn't, in my eyes, believable. One, I know the truth. Two, obviously, it wasn't believable to the jury either. And we'll get into a couple of the jurors that were on my jury that I chose to have on my jury that my lawyer wanted to strike, but I talked to them, and we'll talk about that when we get to. Actually, let's go ahead and talk about that. So there were two jurors that my lawyer wanted to strike. We had 12 strikes. The state had 12 strikes, and we had 12 strikes. Where you say, nope, not taking them. Immediately, you could say that person's not going to be on my jury. Once you ran out of strikes, whoever's on the jury is on the jury. My lawyer wanted to strike two women in particular, one who had been sexually abused as a child and one that had a child that had been sexually abused. And the way we knew that is, if you've never gone through a trial process, it's called voir dire. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. But so they bring jurors in, they put a bunch of them in, as you're picking a jury. They ask them questions. They've already filled out, questionnaires. They individually ask them questions. They ask questions like, anybody here in this jury box currently ever been sexually abused? People raise their hands. Then they go kind of, if they don't want to say it out in front of everybody, they took some of them up to the judge and spoke about it in front of just the judge and the lawyers. And then they decided, whether that person would immediately be struck by the judge, or, whether we wanted to use our strikes or they wanted to use their strikes. So for example, there was one potential juror. He didn't make it on the jury. They struck the shit out of him. The prosecution did. He actually was arrested and charged in Clayton County for a rape case years prior to mine. My lawyer was actually his lawyer, and he was acquitted and found not guilty of those charges. So when they asked a question of the jurors, the potential jurors that were in the box at the time, and they said, "Do any of you know any of the people at these tables, including the defendant, the defense, or the prosecution?" And he raised his hand, and he said, "I know the defense attorney, Lloyd Matthews, great attorney, by the way. If you're in Cherokee, Georgia, or the Northwest area, Georgia, you need a lawyer, you call Lloyd Matthews. Two L's, OYD Matthews." Um, he said, "I know Mr. Matthews." And they say, "How do you know Mr. Matthews?" He says, "Well, Mr. Matthews was my attorney in a rape case here in Clayton County where I was found not guilty." Then they asked him, the judge asked him, "Will that impact you on being able to be an impartial juror?" He absolutely said, "Yes, it will. I don't believe him." He said, "I don't trust the state." I can't remember exactly what he said, but I remember thinking to myself, and the judge could have struck him at that moment, but they didn't. I remember thinking to myself, there's no way he's going to be on there. They are absolutely going to strike him. But the two that my lawyer wanted to strike, one who had been sexually abused as a child, the other had a child that had been sexually abused. I told him not to strike them. I wanted them on my jury because if what they were saying was true, then they should be able to read the room, essentially, for lack of a better term. It's not coming to me. They should be able to read her. They should be able to look at some of this and tell, okay, that doesn't quite fit with what I went through or what my child went through. So my lawyer actually told me a couple times, we need to strike them. And we went back and forth for a few minutes about it, and I told him absolutely not. We're not going to strike them. I want them on the jury. Because they did say that even though that those things that happened in their lives, they could be impartial, and I trusted them. They seemed, I'm decent when it comes to reading people, and obviously, it turns out I picked the right jurors because it took them less than 30 minutes. It was between 15 and 30 minutes that the jury deliberations went before I was found not guilty. So here it says Lillian's medication was changed and she would not be ready for a forensic interview. Why was her medication changed? She was on this medication when she made these accusations. Just something I pointed out. It's not something huge, right? It's just something that stood out to me. If she was on that medication, and we'll get to that page, we'll refer back to this, right? So the detective, essentially, her grandmother wanted GSAC, which is Gwinnett County Children's Advocacy Center, to do the interview. Normally it would have been done by the detective, right? But in a lot of cases, I'm sure this isn't the only case, they in lieu of the Detective Langley, sitting down and interviewing her about this story, they decided to let GSAC do the interview. A forensic interviewer, basically a counselor's type deal, sits down with her, and Detective Langley never really spoke to Lillian, as far as I know. Again, she didn't take the stand, so we couldn't ask her that. But she does have her narrative of watching the DVD interview, and again, we'll get to it. But here it is. She's made the accusation. The detective's calling the mental hospital and saying, "Hey, when can we do this interview?" And they're saying, "Look, we just changed her medicine." And I believe it was weeks after this that they actually did sit down and do the interview, which was, again, more than a month after the initial outcry. Let's move on, because we haven't even got off this first page yet, and I'm already, 15 minutes into this, 30 minutes into this. I'm sorry, guys. This interview was conducted more than a month. I say a month, but it's more than a month after Lillian made these allegations about me. Lillian had plenty of time to get this fabricated story straight. Not to mention, this is the only statement taken from Lillian, so there's nothing to check her story against. She never told this story again until trial, in which she told somewhat of a similar story, but very different, and was very uncooperative with the prosecution. I'm going to try to move through this a little bit faster. I know you guys don't want to sit here for 3-4 hours and talk about this, right? DG, and I'm trying not to read the comments. I apologize, folks. And there's not a whole lot coming through, but 15 minutes to organize the vote, 5 minutes. I know exactly actually how it went down. I spoke to 4 of the jurors afterwards. I had their names. I looked them up on Facebook after I was acquitted, weeks after I was acquitted, and spoke with them because I wanted to know how that process went down. Essentially, they went back there and it was 10 not guilty, 2 undecided. The 2 undecided were the 2 that I wanted on the jury that my lawyer wanted to strike, the 2 women. And they were undecided for obvious reasons. One had been abused, one had a child who was abused. It took no time. And I actually spoke to one of those women. One of those women is one of the 4 jurors that I spoke with. And I wanted to let her know part of the reason I reached out to her and I, just said, hey, look, you may not want to talk to me. You may want to talk to me. I told all of them the same thing. But I kind of want to know where your head was at, what you actually thought about the case. And 2, I'm reaching out to let you know that you made the right decision, that you didn't free a guilty man. You set free an innocent man. I wanted to, part of me felt like I needed to put their minds at ease because I thought about it myself, like many times while I was in jail and since jail. How would I have looked at this case? And I'm pretty sure I would have looked at it the same way they did, but without all the facts and not been through what I went through, when you just hear somebody's accused of this, immediately your stomach turns and they're a fucking monster, right? So I kind of wanted to get, sorry about cussing, Katie. I kind of wanted to get a read on them, on what happened in the deliberation room, and also assure them that, they have made the right decision, which is why I reached out to many of them, but 4 of them that I actually talked to later. On that same page of the interview, Lillian says Kayla and I had been smoking. Then I came in her room, and again, we smoked outside. So essentially, I'm guessing she's saying that we came in, I followed her to her room. That's is what was said. Then I came in her room. She says I followed her to her room. As she entered her room, I hit her in the back of the head. I came in her room and hit her in the back of the head, causing her to pass out. Later in the same statement, she says Kayla and the baby were in our room. How can she say later that Kayla was in our room if the last thing she remembered before being knocked unconscious was us smoking, which we smoked outside? This is another inconsistency in her story. Again, I point out many inconsistencies. Let's keep moving through this. I want to do it a little faster. I'm sorry, guys. She said, when I was done, I told her, quote, this is exactly quote, and you'll see it later. She said, when I was done, I told her, quote, if you tell anybody, I'm going to hurt you, but I don't know how. Now, what I wrote here is the same thing I've said since and will say after. I'm not in the habit of threatening 12-year-old girls, but if I wanted to intimidate one, I think I could do much better than this. This statement doesn't even sound believable. Again, I'm going to let you guys decide. 6 people in the room as of right now, right? And however many watch this later. Does that sound like something fabricated, or does that sound like a real threat? Like, let's just say a man gets done raping a young, very, very young child, and he wants to threaten her. Now, I'm decent with words. Some people think I have a poor vocabulary because I cuss a lot, right? It's not true. It's not true at all. Again, I don't go around threatening children, but if I did, I would do much better than if you tell anybody, I'm going to hurt you, but I don't know how. It just never made sense to me. And it never made sense to me how that made sense to the detectives, right? Let's move on. She says this. Now, this is the summary. This is Detective Langley's summary after she watched the DVD. I'm still on the same, couple of pages, which again, we'll get into. She said, when I was done, I told her, okay, I got there. She says here, she didn't pay attention, quote, didn't pay attention to see if anything was coming out of her. But approximately 1 hour later, she tells Kathy Carter during the sexual assault exam, that she experienced, quote, experienced slight bleeding. Yet another example of her story not being consistent. Refer to page 48 for the sexual assault exam. Now, it's going to be hard for you to understand this right now, and even going through the discovery file. So The day they did this forensic interview, the day they sat her down, recorded this only one and only interview that was done about this. Later, after the interview, less than an hour later, they do a sexual assault exam. So she tells Kelly Burks, I believe, is the forensic interviewer. She tells her in the forensic exam, I didn't pay attention to see if anything was coming out of me. Approximately 1 hour later, she tells Kathy Carter, who did the sexual assault exam, um, who was the witness that took the stand, that basically proved my innocence. Not by choice, but just by the facts. Um, she tells Kathy Carter that she experienced slight bleeding. Again, just another inconsistency. That was the same day, less than an hour later, and the story wasn't straight. And again, maybe sometimes they're in real cases where real situations, horrific, terrible situations like this happen. Um, yeah, there's going to be times that they misremember, or that things just they forget about this, they say it later. I understand that happens, right? But you're less than an hour from telling this and then telling that. You're less than an hour from just conflicting from the only interview you do on this for the entire more than 2 years of the case, to less than an hour later saying something completely different. Just another inconsistency, which this case was full of. She said it burned when she used the bathroom. Now, this one right here is actually false, and I'm going to explain it to you. She said it burned when she used the bathroom. She says this because she tested positive for gonorrhea, and this is a side effect of that. She did not contract this from me because this didn't happen, and I've never had gonorrhea. Also, it's unlikely she could have had this for over a year when they did the exam and found it, and not have had to be treated because the side effects would have been extremely uncomfortable. She actually did not test positive for gonorrhea. My first lawyer, who was a paid lawyer, who we paid lots of money, and he's not a bad lawyer, but he just wasn't ready for this case, and he made some mistakes early on. His people who were pouring over the case for him, or him, or whoever, said that when they went through the file, right, that she tested positive for gonorrhea. So that's where that came from. I'm not a doctor. I don't know how to read a lot of these exam pages that we're going to get into, so I didn't exactly know. All I went on was those words. We found out later she didn't test positive for any STDs. Not only that, her hymen was completely intact. Again, we'll get into that. The biggest piece of information that set me free was that her hymen was completely intact. And this sexual assault nurse that she told a different story to about the slight bleeding is the one that got on the stand and said her hymen was intact. We'll get to that. Don't worry. Yeah, so let's go on to the next page here. By her own admission, I never said anything inappropriate to her. I would think, and she said that, I've never did or said anything inappropriate to her before or after this supposed crime happened. I would think that there, and again, I'm reading this, if you just join in, I'm reading this as I wrote it in jail, as I'm going through this, as I'm sitting in my cell. All of this was written in jail. I didn't sit down and write all this for this live stream. This was all written in my cell in 2017, late 2016, early 2017. By her own admission, I never even said anything inappropriate to her. I would think that there would be actions or behavior that would precede something like this. I would think it would be more common to try and entice these actions rather than just attack the victim. The entire story just doesn't make sense when you break it down. We all have heard the word grooming. If you know anything about sexual assault cases or anything like that, there's a word called grooming. Typically, and it's not always happens, there are violent people out there that I'm sure commit horrible violent rapes. But typically with kids, and the facts support this, if somebody wants to abuse a child in this way, they typically, especially if it's somebody that lives with you, you would use grooming process, I'm sure. Now, I don't know because I'm not a child molester. All right, let me look directly into I am not a child molester. I am not a rapist. I've never raped anybody. But we have all watched documentaries or, heard people's stories about situations like this. It's terrible, but this shit happens. So when you look these things up, you realize that grooming is something that typically happens, especially when the victim knows the assailant. But she's saying that just with 4 adults and a child in the house, all of them in the house less than 20 feet. The furthest person away would have been 20 or 25 feet away. The closest person would have been directly on the other side of the wall, less than 10 feet away. With all these people in the house, I just followed her in the room, knocked her out to the point where she had a knot on her head the next day, knocked her unconscious, and raped her. So it's never made sense, right? Just another thing that just doesn't make sense. She said Randy's brother, Jared, which was my fiance at the time's, Randy was Kayla's uncle. Kayla was my fiance at the time. We'll just start calling her Kayla, right? Randy was Kayla's uncle. Randy was also Aaron, Lillian's mother's boyfriend. They had only been together for a couple of months. Lillian only lived in the house for a couple of months. Aaron only lived in the house for a couple of months. In fact, not long after Lillian was removed from the house and placed with her grandmother, we kicked Aaron and Randy out of the house because they weren't paying bills. They were really just sitting up in the room doing drugs, prescription pills. Jared and Randy both had prescriptions. They were both prescription pill addicts, but they had prescriptions. They were pill hoppers. They were doctor hoppers. And that's what they did. They stayed in their rooms all day. Neither one of them had jobs. Aaron didn't have a job when she was living with us. But all the three of them did was stay in their rooms all day, almost every day. Very rarely. Jared never left the house. Jared almost never left his room. Randy and Aaron very rarely, maybe once a week, if that, would go to the gas station up the road and come back. I was never alone with her, but she doesn't even say this happened when we were alone. She says everybody was in the house, right? Not only that, Jared and Randy and Aaron all were night owls. They would all stay up until 3, 4, 5 in the morning. She says this happened around midnight in June or July. So she doesn't know the time. She doesn't know the month, but this supposedly happened to her. So she said Randy's brother, Jared, who was Kayla's dad, was in his room. This would put him approximately 10 feet from her bed. He was also a night owl, staying up late. And he will testify that he does not believe this happened. He didn't have to testify. But yeah, I mean, he didn't take the stand. He would have. We just didn't call him. We didn't need him. Next, she says Aaron, her mom, and Randy, her mom's boyfriend, Kayla's uncle, Jared's brother, were in their room, which would have been basically catty corner. Again, you'll see the diagram of the house. Were in their room, which would put them approximately 15 feet away from Lillian's bed. So this means that there were 3 people very close to where she says this happened, and no one heard any commotion of her being knocked out and raped. Her mother, Erin, was never even interviewed. She took the stand at trial, basically said nothing of substance, again, except for she was a bad mother and that I'd never done or said anything that she knew of that was inappropriate. But she was never interviewed. So they never sat her down. They never interviewed anybody in the house. The only person in the house that was interviewed was obviously Lillian. And then Kayla was interviewed. My fiance at the time was interviewed. But she wasn't even interviewed by the detective. She was interviewed by the public defender. So early on in my case, the public defender's office reached out to Kayla and said, "Hey, so what do you think? Let's talk to you about this." And that's one of I believe that's the first page of the discovery pack. So none of these people in the house, the detectives never interviewed Randy. They never interviewed Jared. They never interviewed Aaron. They never interviewed Kayla. The detectives interviewed nobody. All they did was watch a DVD of Lillian telling this story to a forensic interviewer. Let's move on. She says she told Joyce, Maggie, Taylor, and Andrea while she was in 8th grade. These were supposedly the first people that she told. Joyce was supposedly the first person that she told. This would be approximately a month before she made the allegations when she was locked in the mental hospital. When it comes to these friends, there are no statements from these girls. Also, at a status hearing on 7/7/16, which is 5 to 6 months after I was arrested, the ADA, Assistant District Attorney, John Fowler, said it took a while, to track these friends down because they only had first names. But when they were contacted and interviewed, the girls were uncooperative. I believe this is because they didn't know what the detective was talking about. Now, this has intrigued me and annoyed me a lot throughout the entire process and even since. That was the only mention, other than in her story, she says, "I told Joyce, Maggie, Taylor, and Andrea. These were the first people that I told." The only mention of them from that point to the end of trial was at the status hearing 5 months or so after I was arrested. And my lawyer had to ask about it. Like, so do we have statements from these girls that she supposedly told? And the ADA says, listen, it took us a while. It's taken us months to track them down to get, to talk to them. And when we finally got in touch with them, they were uncooperative. That is all he said. This is one of the reasons that we decided to let my first paid lawyer go. I was very upset with him after that hearing when he came back to the tank and talked to me. I asked him, why didn't you find out exactly what uncooperative means? That could mean 1,000 different things, right? Uncooperative could mean that they had no idea what she's talking about. Uncooperative could mean that they just didn't want to get involved because they didn't want to have to testify. Uncooperative could mean 1,000 different things. But the fact that he didn't go into it, so let's say, for the sake of the trolls that'll never believe me, they'll say, well, those girls probably just didn't want to get involved. Their parents didn't want them to have to testify. Okay. That's what the DA would have said. The DA would have stood there, instead of just labeling it as uncooperative, the DA would have said, listen, we talked to these girls, and this is on the record. So it's not in front of a jury, right? This is just a hearing in front of the defense, the prosecution, and the judge. He could have absolutely said, listen, we talked to them. They said that, yeah, she told them this, but they don't want to get involved because they don't want to have to take the stand. So we're not going to use this piece of evidence. They didn't say that. All he said was uncooperative. Never heard about them again. They weren't brought up at trial. They weren't brought up any other time. There's never been a statement. There's never been an interview. This is the only mention, was her telling them that those were the first people that she told. And then the DA saying, yeah, we talked to them, but they were uncooperative. Again, let's move on. The time frame she puts this in is June or July, again, of 2014. The outcry was in September 2015. I was arrested February 2016. The time frame she puts this in is June or July. I believe such a traumatic experience would be hard to forget, but I understand this means nothing in the eyes of the law. Now, what I mean by that is, sure, like if this is years later, and again, this is more than a year after it's supposed to have happened to the time that she makes the outcry, right? I look at it as, if it were me, I would have been able to think to myself, was it before the 4th of July or after the 4th of July? What did I do last year for 4th of July, right? Like, did this happen before the 4th of July? Or like something like that could have helped me narrow it down if it were me. Again, that doesn't mean anything in the eyes of the law. Yes, many times people have, I'm sure, gone through horrible experiences like this, and it absolutely been true. And they couldn't put an exact date on it, right? But to be off by a couple of months is a little weird less than a year later, just in my opinion. But some people may disagree. Let's move on. I forgot where I was. Sorry. Lillian says her grandmother, quote, asked around to her friends, and that's how she found out about the rape. Shirley never mentions this. Shirley never mentions, I talked to her friends. Her friends told me that she had told her she was raped. In fact, she says she found out when she found Lillian's diary and confronted her with it. Just another inconsistency. So Lillian tells the interviewer, my grandmother, this is after she's been to the hospital, this is over a month after her grandmother has confronted her with the diary, right? Which I believe the grandmother's story. I believe the grandmother found this diary, confronted her with it. That's how the grandmother found out. More than a month later, so she's out of the hospital by this point. The story's being told. It's been an accusation of sorts for over a month, and she's telling the story. So she's back at home with her grandmother, living there. They've had time to talk about the situation, right? Even then, she's not able to get the story straight. So she tells this forensic interviewer more than a month after the initial outcry, more than a month after her grandmother comes to her with the diary, says, hey, this says you were raped. Who raped you? She tells this forensic interviewer, my grandmother asked around to my friends, and that's how she found out. No, grandmother says that she found out from the diary. She found your diary while she was getting you clothes. Again, we'll see all this. Later on, this is all the Detective Langley's narrative that her bullet points, which you'll see, that she goes through and watches the DVD and goes through it. This is just what she wrote down, her notes. But this is obviously my handwritten contention, my handwritten defense while I'm in jail to what I'm reading at the time, sitting in my cell. She says her mother, quote, didn't care. I think exactly what she says was, I felt used and I felt like my mom didn't care. Now, what that stood out to me, and I'll just read to you what I wrote at the time there in 2000 and late 2016, I believe. How could her mother care if she never told her that this had happened? Numerous times, Lillian's relationship, or lack thereof, with her mom is mentioned. I believe this may be the reason she made these allegations, to get her mom back in her life. Her mom was in Florida on a drug binge with Randy when Lillian said this, in which she took Randy's truck, drove directly back up here to Georgia after Lillian was admitted to the hospital and the rape allegation was first coming out, right? I believe it was said to get her mom to come home, which is exactly what happened. Her mom came home. I don't know about their life now. I have no idea. Don't follow them. Never reached out to them. I've wanted to a couple times. I've wanted to reach out to many people involved in this case and say, what do y'all think now? Right. But I haven't. And the main reason is because there's nothing illegal about that. Right. So I could direct message Lillian on Facebook if I wanted to. If I find her Facebook account, I could send her a message and say, hey, will you tell the truth? Right. And I've wanted to look her up and try to get that to happen. The reason I think I haven't is because I feel like if she was going to do that, she would reach out to me, and that me reaching out to her, again, a 100% innocent man of what I was accused of, but still feel guilty about how she felt about all this for some weird reason, right? So part of the reason I've never reached out to say, hey, will you please tell the truth about this, is because I don't want to disrupt her life, right? She's in her 20s now. She's 20 something. I don't want to disrupt her life. I feel like I look at this and say, if I would have made an allegation like this against somebody and it'd been false, right? If I would have just told a blatant effing lie like this, it would be hard for me to live with myself. Like if I'm still keeping it inside years and years later, like I would probably have depression issues. Which I do have depression issues, but for other reasons. I would probably have drug issues, or like, I feel like part of me wants her to come clean because I feel like maybe that'll save her in the future. But the other part of me feels like, yeah, it doesn't matter at this point what she says or thinks. The only thing that matters is what I know and what the facts proved. So that's the reason I've never reached out to anybody. And again, I have all of their phone numbers from the time. I have the grandmother's address, which I'm sure is still the same. You're not going to see any of that. Again, I've edited, those things out. But it's something that maybe in the future I will. I don't know. It's something I've battled back and forth with for years. We're talking about 6 years since the verdict, right? I don't know. One day, maybe. We'll see. If I do, I'll let you know how it goes. Again, she says her mother didn't care and blah, blah, blah. Next time, the time frame, she puts it in June, July. I got there. Okay, so here's another page that the detective wrote that we'll get to. Here it says she's been seeing a psychologist for the past 8 months for, quote, anger issues with her mom. Another sign that her problems stem from her home life. Why wasn't she being seen for issues with sexual abuse? Because this didn't happen, right? So before they even enter her into the mental hospital for cutting and find the diary, she's already been seeing a psychologist for anger issues with her mom. That's what she's going to a psychologist for. Now, the detractors will say, well, she just didn't want to tell the story. She wasn't ready to tell the story yet. Sure, you can say that if you want to. She has no reason not to, though, right? So from the time that she's removed from the house, from the time she went to her grandmother's house in August of 2014, 2 months after she's supposed to have been raped, I've never seen her again. She tells her grandmother all this stuff about her mom. DFAX gets involved, puts her with the grandmother. Mom loses custody. They go on a drug binge in Florida. I never see her again. So she's had all this time being seen by psychologists, DFAX case, all this, never said a word about anything about sexual abuse from anybody, much less me. Just another thing that's just never made sense to me, right? So there's 3 pages of her diary. I believe there might be 1 or 2 more pages than that in this file. So my discovery pack that I had in jail actually didn't have all the diary pages. I had 3 pages. There might be only 3 pages in this one. I actually remember sometime reading. I haven't gone through this discovery packet in quite a while. I didn't read through this again. I glanced through it to make sure her name was redacted because again, my wife did the redactions. But I didn't go through this and like study it like I'd done in jail. I wanted to go through this fresh again with you guys. It's almost like revisiting it again. I think the last time I probably went through this would have been 2019 or 2020, somewhere around. I might have looked through it in COVID while I had nothing to do. I don't know. Recently I took it up, had it turned into a PDF, and I sent this to an investigative reporter with Fox 5 in Atlanta. I sent him my entire discovery pack because he wanted to cover the odd video where all this kind of came out on YouTube, right? The reason we didn't do that is we both kind of agreed that I would look like an asshole. He didn't want me that, not because of this, but because I'm going after commerce. His idea was, look, if you were in Clayton County, you were auditing Clayton County, and all this stuff with aud happened in Clayton County, I think the story would make you look better because they were the ones that did this to you, right? But you're auditing in commerce 2.5 hours away from Clayton County. So you're going to kind of look like an asshole, like you're just messing with the cops. I said, cool, whatever. I agree with it. And of course, in the Emerson video and the odd video, I do kind of look like an asshole. Even though they both got fired for their actions, they both violated my rights and violated me personally. I still was an asshole. Like I let my emotions get to me. I cussed them. I said things that I would go back and not say. I don't regret anything essentially, but there were things that I've not said to maybe look a little bit better in those videos. But again, I posted the entire video, so I don't care what anybody thinks of me, to be honest with you. But I'm getting off track. So this is the diary entry, 3 pages of the diary entry. We'll get to that, obviously, if you're here long enough. When you read this diary entry, you'll notice the tone changes from dark and depressing in the first 2.5 pages. But the last paragraph, which is separate from everything else, like even has a couple lines in between it, right? Oh, excuse me, drink too much tea. But the last paragraph, starting with, quote, "And because this is my diary," unquote, the tone is almost bragging about the things that she's done, i.e., smoking cigarettes, doing meth, having sex. You would think that the depressing tone would still be there when she writes about being raped, but she mentions it very nonchalant, saying at the end, quote, "And I was raped." Also, the first and last lines in this paragraph point to this being left for someone to find. She says at the beginning, quote, "And because this is my diary and no one's to read it," unquote. And then she goes on to say, "I've done all these things," right? And at the end, she says, quote, "But this is none of your business," unquote. I believe she left this for someone to find. Just sounds like it to me, right? Only the real journalist covered your story. You're exactly right, Katie Zed. You're the only one. The real journalist. The first one to give me a platform, and the first one to, you're the first person outside of my wife, my mother, and some friends that have ever looked at this case file. And you got almost all of it. I don't think I sent you these because I didn't have them in a PDF, right? So I sent you pictures, I believe. It probably would have been much easier for you to have this PDF, but hindsight's always 2020. So let's move on to the next page. This is Biden's children journal. When we get to the journal, you'll see what I mean. So she writes all this deep, dark, depressing thing for a couple of pages, and it's really all about her mom. "You're not in my life. Why are you not around? I need you most," and this and that. Then all of a sudden it gets to this, "And this is my journal. You're not supposed to be reading this. I've done all this, and I was raped. But you're not supposed to be reading this." Whatever. Okay, let's move on to the next page. Again, this is taking a while. We're an hour and 3 minutes, and we're not even through my breakdown of this. From when I was in jail. Again, if you haven't heard that part, this is all from when I was in jail, handwritten in my cell. Here, Detective Langley mentions receiving the medical assessment from Kelly Burks. Those records state, quote, "The exam is normal and consistent with the history given," unquote, which the history given was of a rape occurring. Well, if you refer to page 46, which is the exam page, the only findings are a, quote, clear to whitish thick substance, which is labeled as a quote normal finding. The other finding is that the hymenal is vertical. Now, here's where we had no idea. Again, me nor any one of my lawyers are medical professionals. So when we're looking at this, and I don't think any of my lawyers, other than Lloyd Matthews, had dealt with a rape case that I know of. But again, he's not a doctor, so when he looks at these things, unless he's, we're not spending money on medical experts to look at these pages, right? So I'm told that what it says on this page, this medical sexual assault exam page about the hymen, I'm told it originally by my paid attorney that it means that her hymen was broken. That it means, and she says in her diary, right, I've had sex and I was raped. So she says that not only has she had consensual sex, but that she was raped, and then later says that she was raped by me. But so while I'm writing this in jail, I'm the entire time I'm in jail, I'm thinking that this page that I'm referring to in this little page 34A, I'm thinking that what it says about the hymen means the hymen has been broken. The hymen is not intact anymore. Turns out we were completely opposite. And when I believe it's Kathy Carter, not Kelly Burtz. I may have the two names mixed around. One was the forensic examiner that did the sexual assault exam. One was did the forensic interview. I may have gotten the names mixed around. We'll see when we get to it, right? But it says the other finding is that the hymenal is vertical, which shows that she has had intercourse. No, it doesn't. That's not what that meant. That's what I was told it meant by my original attorney, and that's what we thought until trial. Until this, I believe it was Kathy Carter, not Kelly Burtz. I believe I got those two mixed up here as I'm writing this in my cell. But when she gets on the stand and my lawyer asks her about the hymen, she says it's intact. It's normal. And he says, and it catches him off guard, and it completely catches me off guard. Like this is one of the parts of the trial that I remember almost verbatim. My lawyer says to her, okay, so he asks her, in what condition was her hymen? And she says her hymen was intact and normal. And my lawyer, I remember looking at him, right? And he paused and he was just staring at her for a second. And then his next statement question was, didn't you just say in this same exam that the exam is normal and consistent with the history given of rape? She said, yes. He said, if her hymen is intact at the time of this exam, how can it be normal and consistent with the history of a rape? She says, well, because she says that it burned when she peed. And then she goes on to say, 0.012, I forget, but it was like a fraction of a percent of women in the world have a hymen that acts almost, and she described it like a scrunchie, like for your hair, right? I got scrunchies on. So essentially it's intact, but it's perforated and has a hole through it. So the hymen, and we're not going to go into sexual education here. Katie Zed did that on her channel whenever we talked about this the first time last year. But so essentially the hymen is intact, right? And when someone is penetrated, 99% of the time, the hymen is now not intact. In this fraction of a percent of women, it'll act as a scrunchie. So the hymen will still be intact, but it'll be perforated and have a hole through it. After she says this, my lawyer then asks her, was her hymen perforated? She says no. He then asks her again, how can you give a normal and consistent history of rape if her hymen is intact, not perforated? She said, well, because the description of her saying that it burned when she peed is consistent with there being scarring inside of the vagina from sex and the acidic urine making it burn. That was the reason she decided to say that it was consistent and normal with the history given. Bullshit, right? Bullshit. You want to know what's bullshit? Because my doctor asked her, or my lawyer asked this doctor, when you did a swab of her vagina, you mentioned that you swabbed her hymenal area and that it was normal. And I forgot the exact words. It's in one of these pages you'll see. Did you find any scarring that was consistent with someone who has had intercourse before? She said, no. So she's saying, like, this, and the foreman of my jury who I talked to, he was a guy, black guy in his probably 30s. Um, when we talked, I remember him saying that's what did it for him. That when they first went back there, he tells the rest of the jury that nurse that did the sexual assault exam is completely just out of line with what she's saying. There's no way that this hymen could be intact. The scrunchy thing, yeah, it's possible, but she says that it's not the case in here. She says there's no scarring. Her paperwork says when she does a swab, a separate piece of paper from what I'm referring to here, but another piece of paper where she did this cotton swab of the hymen that it was normal and that she didn't find any discomfort. Like Lillian didn't experience any discomfort, whatever. Like, but it was all consistent with the history given of rape, right? Um, Again, it's just this was the biggest piece that I believe set me free. I know for the foreman, it was his biggest piece. The hymen being intact, this nurse just falling all over herself with each question my lawyer asked. This was the biggest thing that sent me home. I think that and my testimony when I took the stand, because I did take the stand in my trial. Let me stop for a second and just acknowledge any few of these comments. No, just kidding. Journal entry, just journal is definitely a cry for help. I agree with that. I hope you ate before you started because this fits to be a 12-hour stream. We're going to get through it a little bit faster. A lot of the pages, I'm going to, stop for a second. If people want to pause later on, come back to this, pause and read whatever. The important stuff I'll go through. Much of it I won't. But we are at an hour and 11 minutes, and I haven't even gotten into the discovery pack yet, right? But we're going to get there. So if you can't stay the whole time and you got to come back and watch it later, I get it. I understand, because this is going to take a while, but this has been a long time coming. So here I am for the entire time of my incarceration before we get to trial, thinking that what the paper says is her hymen is broken. She's had sex. No, it's the exact opposite. It says that her hymen is intact. When a doctor looks at this piece of paper that we'll look at here later, he will say, if he knows what he's talking about, right? If this is what he deals with, he will say, yes, her hymen is intact. She's never had intercourse before. So Kathy Carter mentions here that Lillian's mom has been in and out of the patient's life, quote unquote. Here is another reference to the mental issues that she's dealt with when it comes to her mother. My fiance at the time, Kayla, will testify that the only complaints Lillian ever made while living in our house were about her mother. She claimed that her mother went from boyfriend to boyfriend and would ignore her to spend time with these men. Also, her mom would repeatedly leave her with Shirley, her grandmother, while disappearing for long periods of time. This was something that was happening throughout her life way before I ever knew her, right? And Randy, Kayla's uncle, Aaron, Lillian's mother's boyfriend, was just the next guy that Lillian's mother went to and did the same thing that she had done multiple times before. We had no idea that this is, like what was going on until Lillian told Kayla this. And again, Lillian only lived in our house for 2 or 3 months from the time that her and her mom moved in, because they didn't have anywhere to go because Shirley had kicked the mom out, but she still had custody of Lillian. So she said, I'm taking my daughter with me. She comes to live with us because her and Randy have been dating for literally weeks. I'm cool. I've worked 6 days a week. I don't care who lives in the house. Really, all I do is work, come home, chill with my daughter and my fiance. I never spent time with Lily. The most conversation I had with her in the couple months that she stayed with us was hi or bye. Hey, there's some food in here. Hey, we're going to go grab food. Do you want us to bring you something back? Something like that. That's the most contact I ever had with her. Never had any physical contact. I believe I did have one conversation with her, and Kayla was there at the same time. And the only conversation I really had with her, she was being bullied. She was talking about being bullied for her weight in school. And I told her how I dealt with bullies. I just became funnier than they were, right? That's the only conversation I can ever remember having with her. Again, other than the hi or bye or we're going to get food. Do you want something? But again, this is just another example of how terrible her home life and her parents were, which is what I believe. I don't believe she was raped. Again, her hymen was intact, right? Could she have been abused in different ways by other people? It's possible. I don't know. but I do fully in my heart believe, and I've bounced around with this over the years. Excuse me. I fully believe that she said this for the attention and to get her mom back in her life. But who knows? We'll move on. In this next summary, Detective Langley mentions the first time we spoke. Detective Langley mentions the first time we spoke on December 16th, 2015. So Lillian goes to the mental hospital. The detective says September 23rd, not 2016, 2015 is when we spoke there. So the detective says Lillian goes to the hospital September 23rd, 2015. Shirley, Lillian's grandmother, says Lily goes to the hospital September 30th. Whatever. I don't care which date it is. So in September, she gets admitted to the hospital. They find the diary. The rape accusation is made. I believe it was October 30th or something like that, 27th or 30th. We'll see, when they sat down and did the forensic interview. So from September all the way to December is the first time that Detective Langley reaches out to me in any way. And actually, she's missing one of our conversations in this discovery pack. So every conversation we had, every voicemail I left, she doesn't go into detail about the voicemails except for one of them, which is kind of funny. We'll get to it. But so she has a summary for Mr. Quiros called and left me a voicemail asking me to return his call. I called Mr. Quiros, left him a voicemail, asked him to return his call. But September's the outcry, right? September 2015. So in this summary, Detective Langley mentions the first time we spoke on December 16th, 2015. What? We're talking about almost 3 months later. When she told me I was a suspect in a crime. There's a summary for almost every phone call. I didn't even know I wrote this. Again, I haven't read this in forever, right? There is a summary for almost every phone call between Detective Langley and me. And I is what it should have been. Even when we only left voicemails. But there is no summary of the conversation we had on December 17th. In this 9-minute conversation, Detective Langley tells me I'm accused of a sexual assault. I, in turn, tell her if this is, quote, if this is about a 12-year-old girl who lived in our house who was being neglected by her mother, then it's bullshit. The reason I had an idea it was Lillian accusing me was because the day before, my fiance had spoken to her grandmother who lived beside us down there in Clayton County when we lived down there. So Kayla talks to her grandmother. Her grandmother, who lived beside us on Castlewood Drive, where this rape's supposed to have taken place, to find out if she had any idea why Clayton County, because here I am, for a few days, Clayton County's, they came to my mom's house, right? And I didn't live there at the time. They didn't have my phone number. They just had what was the address that was on my ID, which was my mom's house. As soon as I find out, they leave a card there when they talk to my grandfather. As soon as my mom calls me the next day, and we were kind of not on speaking terms, so I think she actually called Kayla and tells her, hey, this detective came by from Clayton County looking for Shane. I called the next day. So they drove up here. They went to a job that I hadn't worked at for 3 years. I don't know how they even knew I worked there before. They went there. They said all they knew was I hadn't been there for 3 years, and then they knew that I worked for a plumbing company in Banks County. Then she goes, and her and this other detective go to my mom's house, and they speak to my grandfather. He's like, look, due to a family altercation, we don't really speak. I don't know his address, but I can, pass along the message. She says, here, give him my card. My mom gives me or Kayla, I don't remember, gives one of us the message the next day. I immediately called the detective. Like, I have nothing to fear. Like, I'm like, what could this be? And to be honest, the thing I thought it was about is I had a car that the engine blew up on me on my way to work. I was a sous chef when I lived down there. So I'm driving to work, had this old Honda. The engine blows up on the side of 675, I think is the name of the interstate. And I left the car there. I didn't care. It was an old ass Honda. I think I paid $500 for it just to get back. It lasted me for a year or something like that. The tag was stolen off of it. And the reason I know this is because we passed it like every day. Kayla's grandfather was taking me to work since the car had exploded, right? So for a week or 2 weeks or whatever it was, the car sat there on the side of the road that we passed it every day that I went to work, 6 days a week. Eventually, a few days like after it had blown up, somebody stole the tag off of it. So essentially, when I call this detective back, I'm assuming that somebody used that tag in some type of crime, like a robbery or something like that, and that tag led back to me. That's really what I'm assuming, because that's the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about it. Like, why would a Clayton County detective be trying to get in contact with me? All I did was like work and come home. Yeah, I smoked weed. That's what I did. I didn't do any other drugs at the time. I was a drug addict in my past before my daughter was born. At the time, I didn't do any other drugs. I smoked weed. Other than that, like buying some weed from somebody, I never sold weed or anything. I just never sold drugs down there. I never got into a fight with anybody. I never robbed anybody. I've never robbed anybody in my life. Basically, I'm a law-abiding citizen. I might speed a little bit now, like even these days, right? I don't break the law. Which some people say, and I think Katie Zed says this before. There's so many laws on the books that it's something like we break 3 laws a day, no matter what, right? Even Jesus Christ would break 3 laws a day. There's so many laws on the books. I don't know what the saying is, but that's essentially what I thought. That tag was stolen, and because I remember back, this might, and I even asked her the first time we spoke. I was in a Home Depot. I think I called her, left her a voicemail because she didn't answer. She called me back a couple days later, didn't get me. It took a couple of voicemails before we finally got in touch. I'm in Home Depot with my boss of the plumbing company that I work for, and she wouldn't tell me what I was accused of. So she's just telling me, look, we just need you to come down here. And I think I said, does this have anything to do with the tag? Like, did you get my name? She wouldn't tell me what type of crime it was, who was accusing me, nothing. All she said was, you are a suspect in a crime and we need to speak with you. And I'm like, this sounds fishy. And then I asked her, like, because like I said, this is what I'm thinking. Did you get my name from a tag? I said, because I had a car that had the tag stolen off of it. And if that's how you got my name, then like I'm pretty sure we can settle this easily. I'd come down there or whatever. She says, no, that's not it. You need to come down here. And eventually we'll get to where, she tells me what it was. But where was I at on that? So Detective Langley tells me I'm accused of a sexual assault. I tell her, if this is about a 12-year-old, Detective Langley goes on to use this later on, right? And all of her warrants and everything that she filed, you'll see she says that I said, and what she says is completely different from what I said. She says that I said, I know what the incident is, and it's about a 12-year-old girl that lived in the house. She never said that I said it was bullshit, which I absolutely said. I 100% remember word for word. And Kayla could tell you word for word because she was sitting right there with me when I said it. Because again, we had just found out the day before that Lillian had been placed in a hospital. She informed us, Kayla's grandmother, Lillian had been in a mental hospital. Also, I was around very few females while living down there. The only other females I was around, Kayla, her grandmother, my daughter, Lily, Aaron, and a few girls that I worked with. And I knew that the girls at the restaurant, at the country club, none of them had any reason to accuse me of this, which Lillian didn't have a reason to accuse me of this either, but having known from like the day before, it might have been even 2 days before, I don't remember. Here I'm saying it was the day before before the detective tells me that is about a rape. So she doesn't have this summary in there, but she does mention this in the warrant affidavits. So again, the reason I had an idea it was Lillian accusing me was because the day before, my fiance had spoken to her grandmother, who lived beside us on Castlewood Drive, to find out if she had any idea why Clayton County wanted to talk to me. She said she did not, but she informed us that Lillian had been in a mental hospital. She also informed us that Erin, Lillian's mother, had basically stolen Randy's truck in Florida, left him in Florida, drove all the way back up here because Lily was in the mental hospital. Also, I was around very few females while living down here. So process of elimination led me to Lillian when I learned I was accused of a sexual assault. And actually, it was pretty quickly. And this is one thing many people might look at and say, hey, that's fishy. That's suspect. Cool. You can say that. But it was easy for me. Again, the day before, we found out this little girl's just gone to the mental hospital and her mother just rushed back up here. Something's going on with that. Next thing I know, I'm finding out. And I believe her grandmother, she might not have said, oh, she just went to the mental hospital the day before. She might have just said, hey, she's been in the mental hospital. I don't know exactly how that conversation went down, to be honest with you. But I know that her grandmother Kayla's grandmother told her, yeah, Lily was I don't know why Clayton County's looking for Shane. They haven't come here or anything. But did you know Lily was in the mental hospital? Um, so again, process of elimination. Uh, Again, it's kind of weird that she has summaries of even voicemails where I just left her a voicemail. She doesn't even say what I said in the voicemail other than to call me back. But she doesn't have this summary from this conversation. The only place she even mentions I say anything about if this is about a 12-year-old, she says, I think she says, I know what this is, or I know what this is about. It's about a little girl who lived in our house that wasn't being taken care of by her mother, which almost sounds like an admission, right? That's not what I said at all. This is what I said. I said, if this is about a 12-year-old who lived in our house who was being neglected by her mother, then it's bullshit. I might have even said complete bullshit, but this is what I said. Let's move on to the next summary because, again, here we are, hour 25 minutes, and we're not even out of my notes and gotten into the discovery file yet. Hell, this might have to be a two-parter. I don't know. I'll try to get through it all tonight, guys, but I do have to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning, so we'll see what happens. Page 54. This summary mentions an argument between Detective Langley and myself. This is the funny summary that I actually kind of love. Katie said this will kind of disappoint you a little bit, but it'll also make you think, yeah, that was Shane. I might have sent you this. This summary mentions an argument between Detective Langley and myself where I began to curse and she ended the conversation. I called back and left her a message, which was a mistake. I was angry and felt like I was presumed guilty because someone had accused me of a sexual assault. I really didn't believe I could be arrested and charged for something that I didn't do, but I was scared they would find a reason to be able to arrest me, which turned out that a statement was enough. A statement is all you need to not only arrest somebody in Georgia and most states, but a statement is all you need to send somebody to prison for life. A statement, and for that victim to get on the stand and testify to that statement and be believable. If she would have got on the stand, testified to the same exact statement, had the statement been believable, I could have went to prison for life just based on that. No other evidence needed. I regret how I said things in this voicemail, but I stand behind everything that I did say. We'll get to this voicemail at some point, but I cussed her out. And the reason was because at this point during this conversation, I've scheduled an interview with her, which we'll get to. And the plumbing company, we did work for Applebee's. So there was an Applebee's down there in Jonesboro, Georgia, which is in Clayton County. They needed some service work done anyway. So our office scheduled work down there for a day for us to go down there. So I called Detective Langley. I said, listen, we got some work in Jonesboro. I can be down there on this day, which is just like a few days later. I can be down there on this day. Let's do the interview. My boss we were gonna go do the job at first. Shouldn't have taken but a couple of hours. And then we were going to shoot over there. I was going to do the interview. He was going to wait on me. Then we were going to catch some calls coming back. That didn't happen because the night before at another Applebee's in a different city, their water heater went out and it was leaking, right? And a restaurant can't operate if it doesn't have hot water. They have to shut down. So anytime we had a water heater go out with one of our restaurant clients, we had to immediately go address that, sometimes in the middle of the night. So that day that we had scheduled that, so the night before that day, this water heater goes out. I don't remember where it was, to be honest with you. I call the detective and she tells me, hey, you're going to be meeting with this other detective. I'm not going to be in the office that day, but here's this other detective's information. Call him when you get there. I call him that morning early, like 8 or something, like, when I feel like he's in his office. I'm like, hey, I know we have something scheduled for today, but look, we're all the way over here because a water heater busted and we have to go change it out. There's nothing I can do. Let's set up a new time. During this conversation, that in this summary, we had this argument, I cussed her out. I tell her, I'm like, listen, I'll tell you what, we're trying to reschedule. This is after I've missed that appointment, right? She thinks I'm dodging her. I'm sure that's not the case. Even I told her, you can call the plumbing company. They will tell you we absolutely had to go over here and change this water heater. There was no way around it. There was no way I could make it there that day. I said, listen, I'll tell you what, I'm off on Saturdays and Sundays most of the time, every other Saturday and Sunday. So this Saturday and Sunday, I would be on call. So I'd be off unless we had an emergency. Then I would have to go. The next Saturday and Sunday, I was completely off and somebody else was on call. I said, every other Saturday and Sunday, I'm completely off. Let's do this on a Saturday, Sunday. I'll drive down there 2.5 hours, mind you, from where I live. I'll drive down there. We'll have this interview, right? She says to me, I don't work on Saturdays and Sundays. I said, this must not be that fucking important then. And then she hung up because I started cussing more, I believe. And then we'll read the voicemail that I left her because she quotes it, the things that I said. And again, Katie said, we'll look at it and say, this sounds like you. DG1, you're absolutely right. Never talk to the police. They didn't want, I told her this multiple times. I asked for phone interviews at first, even before I knew it was a sexual assault. I'm like, look, can't we do this over the phone? Like, why do I have to drive 2.5 hours down there? I got to miss work, drive all the way down there for something like, at first, I don't even know what's going on. Then you tell me it's a sexual assault. You won't tell me who's accusing me. You won't tell me any other information other than it's a sexual assault. And you want me to drive down there. And she keeps telling me, we just need your side of the story. I said, that's fucking simple. There is no story, right? Like, I'm going to drive down there and all I'm going to be telling you is this never happened. You're going to tell me all these things that have been said or whatever, or the story that you have. And the only thing you're going to get from me is bullshit. So I didn't do that over the phone, especially after she's told me it was a sexual assault, right? I'm thinking for a while, well, maybe I bought weed from the wrong person. I don't know. Like, maybe it was the tag, right? She says it wasn't the tag when I talked to her one time. So they didn't care about my side of the story, because if that were the case, they would have just listened to my side of the story over the phone. There is no fucking story. I never sexually assaulted anybody in my life. There, here, before, after, since, never, right? So when he says ain't no side, right? When he says never talk to police, at the time, I had no issues with going down there, to be honest with you. I was sketched out a little bit. I won't lie. I remember feeling like I could be walking into a trap. I remember telling my boss whenever we scheduled the day for being down there in Jonesboro, I was like, that might be the last day I work with you, man. You might be dropping me off into a fucking trap. They might arrest me right then. And I actually, they had the same amount of evidence when they arrested me that they had when they wanted me to come for an interview. So I fully expect that had I actually went down there, because I never did go down there for an interview. When I called her and cussed her out, I think I called her back one more time, tried to set up an interview, or maybe I'm getting it mixed up. Maybe I called and cussed her out because, yes, okay, I'm sorry. Let me go back. Let me jump back. I called and cussed her out because she wouldn't do this on a weekend. And then I called and set up an appointment. See, I haven't gone through this for a while, so I'm kind of misremembering things. Then after I cussed her out, she hangs up. I leave her a voicemail. I call her back again, and I leave her another voicemail. And the summaries are probably in here. I'm not sure they are. I know they are. And I tell her, listen, I'm willing to come down there whatever day. Let's set it up. She's like, okay, here's the day. But that's when we scheduled the work for Jonesboro after I cussed her out. Right. So I kind of just had that backwards until just now. So I cuss her out. Then my boss says, look, let's just schedule some work for down there. And then let's do that. The water heater goes out. I can't make it. She says to call back and reschedule. I think I never called back. I think I just said, fuck it. At that point, I was just like, fuck it. Never talked to police. I fully expect, had I gone down there for an interview, I would have been arrested anyway. They would have just been a month or two earlier, right? This is all in like December and January when we're talking back and forth. So we're almost out of my notes. This summary mentions an appointment I made to come in for an interview. Although I was reluctant to do this interview, I had all intentions on coming in for it. On the day of the appointment, we had a water heater go out at Applebee's on Memorial Drive. There's the Applebee's that it was, Memorial Drive in Atlanta, I believe Memorial Drive is, and had to do emergency change out. My company has all the paperwork to back this up. I mentioned this because Detective Langley made it sound like I was dodging her. She made this assumption at the preliminary, which I vaguely remember. I remember some of her statement at the preliminary examination, which if you don't know what that is, that's just they also call it an evidentiary hearing for the judge to see if there's enough evidence. The magistrate judge looks at it, listens to a few testimonies and says, yes, there's enough evidence to pass this over to state court, or no, there's not enough evidence and it's dismissed. So she made this assumption at the preliminary that I was dodging her, right? This was not the case. I was actually eager to find out what I was being accused of, and I regret not taking the day off work to come for this interview. I truly believe the detective would have seen the sincerity in me and would have believed me when I said I was innocent. Again, this was written while I was in jail. I don't feel that way now, right? Because I'm much more educated. on how police operate. I'm much more educated on how they handle situations like this. I fully believe, no matter what I said, maybe there's a slight chance they would have been like, okay, her story has some inconsistencies. We're listening to you. We believe you. I think there's less than a 5% chance, and I'm just throwing a small number out there for the sake of a number, less than a 5% chance that I would have walked out of there without having handcuffs on, and this would have been over with had I ever gone for an interview, right? Because again, they had the same amount of evidence before they ever contacted me that they had at the time they arrested me, the same amount of evidence that they had by the time we went to trial, the same amount of evidence that sits here in this discovery pack that you're going to look at now. Nothing's ever changed. So they could have arrested me. They would have arrested me most likely had I ever gone down there. Let's move on. In the affidavit for the warrant, the detective says, when I was told the accusations against me were of a sexual assault, she said I replied by saying, quote, I know what the incident is. It's about a 12-year-old who lived in our house not being taken care of by her mother, unquote. This is a lie. I never said I know what this incident is, quote unquote. If this is about a 12-year-old who lived in our house, no, I never said I know what this incident is, quote unquote. I said, excuse me, if this is about a 12-year-old who lived in our house, again, I said something about not being taken care of by her mother, then it's bullshit. I also referenced the defects case. I believed this was who was accusing me because the previous day, again, my fiance had found out that Lillian had been in a mental hospital. Not that she was in there the day before, because again, all these phone calls are happening months after she's gotten out of the hospital, months after she's made the accusations against me, right? I'm just 3 months after she's made this accusation, I'm talking to these detectives on the phone. Also, my fiance was listening to the conversation between me and Detective Langley and will testify that she lied about what I said. So again, she says I said in the warrant affidavits for every charge. So it says the same exact thing, just different charges in these warrant affidavits. One of the things I'm going to skip over rather quickly. I'll read one of them, and then you can pause on the other ones if you want to, whatever. She says, I know what the incident is. It's about a 12-year-old who lived in our house not being taken care of by her mother, end quote. That is not what I said at all. I completely remember. One, because I said it's fucking bullshit. Complete bullshit. Bullshit is bullshit. I definitely told her it was bullshit. But again, she doesn't even have the summary from that phone conversation in this evidence pack. That was never put in there. The only place that you find that is the warrant affidavit. Let's move on. I bet you record everything now with police. Absolutely. Yes. 100%. They fixate. Absolutely. They do fixate. And listen, fixating in a situation like this, fixating is their job, right? Fixating is what they should be doing if something like this really happened. I'm saying, if you just look at what they had before they ever talked to me, if you just look at her statement, the things that we're going to see, the things that I've talked about in here in my analysis of this discovery pack that I wrote when I was in jail, if you just look at all the things before they ever spoke to me, I don't think they should have believed this case in the first place. I think they should have believed, listen, there's something wrong with this little girl, but we don't believe that she was raped. And maybe they did feel that way. Maybe me cussing the detective out changed their mind. I don't know. But the detective never took the stand in my case in the trial. The detectives, let's reiterate that. Reiterate that, Shane. The detectives in my case never took the stand at trial. The only detective that took the stand at trial in my case was the detective that administered the photo lineup, which those detectives that administer photo lineups absolutely know nothing about the case. He didn't even know which one I was. And the reason for that is so he doesn't hurt the photo lineup, right? So they bring in somebody that has nothing to do with the case. Detective Langley was there when the photo lineup was issued, but she didn't issue it. Another detective, forget his name. So he's the only detective that interviews, that testifies at my trial. And the only thing he can say is, hey, we gave her this photo lineup. She picked him out. I know nothing else about the case. I knew no facts about the case going into it. I still don't know anything about the case. The only thing he did was the photo lineup. Detective Langley and Detective Deese who Detective Deese was like the backup investigator. Detective Langley was the lead investigator. Neither one of them took the stand. They were both listed as witnesses. My attorney told me on the last day. So the way a trial works, the state presents their evidence. Then when they rest, the defense presents their evidence. And then when they rest, the state gets to come back for rebuttal. So my attorney fully thought after they rested and the detectives haven't taken the stand, he's like, listen, most likely what they're going to do is call the detective on rebuttal. They're going to call the detectives. They always call the detectives in cases, right? These lead detectives take the stand in cases. Not in my case. They didn't call her on rebuttal. And one reason I believe is because when we presented our side, when the defense presented our case, I took the stand at the end of our case, at the end of our defense. I took the stand. And here's what I told my attorney when we were basically talking about trial strategy, which we didn't talk a whole lot, right? He's a public defender. It's not like he's down there seeing me. I think I saw Lloyd Matthews he had my case for the last 5 months. So from the time he got my case to the time I went to trial was like 4 or 5 months. And I think I saw him a total of 2 or 3 times, right? Until we picked the jury. But when the last time I see him before we start trial, I tell him, look, I'm taking the stand. He's like, well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. He said, I'll tell you if I think you should take the stand. He said, I'll give you, my advice. He said, it's completely up to you. He says, but, he says, there's instances where the trial is going so well in your favor that you shouldn't take the stand, because once you start bringing in you're saying, hey, I'm a good guy, I've never done anything like this, they can bring up your whole history, right? They can start bringing up my drug history. They can start bringing up anything, which they didn't really have anything on me other than the fact that I was a drug addict, I was a meth addict, I was a pill addict years before any of this is ever supposed to have happened. So my daughter was 2 at the time this rape was supposed to have occurred. I got clean right before my daughter was born. And I think my last relapse was maybe a couple of months after she was born, right? So since then I was clean. I told my attorney, I said, listen, have you ever seen 8 Mile? And he's like, yeah, right? Or no. I asked a couple attorneys this, so I don't remember which one. I think Lloyd Matthews had seen it. Neil Smith, who was like this old 1900-year-old, fucking wanted me to take a 25-year plea deal, didn't really care about the case. He was the first public defender I got after I fired my paid attorney. Neil Smith, 1900 years old, been with the public defender's office 1800 of those years. Didn't care about me, didn't care about my case, didn't care if it was true, didn't care, just farming another case through. I remember asking both of these attorneys, him and Lloyd Matthews, my trial attorney, have you ever seen 8 Mile? I think it was Neil Smith that said, no, I haven't seen it. And then it was Lloyd Matthews that said he had seen it. But then I tell both of them, and the main one that we're talking about now is Lloyd Matthews, my trial attorney. I say, listen, at the end, Eminem decides to go first in the last major rap battle, right? So all these other rap battles he's had leading up to this one, he's gone second. Like, so he goes first in this last one. You know what he decides to do? And I don't think it was his decision. If you go back and watch 8 Mile, I think the guy that he battles in the last battle says, let that bitch go first or whatever. But if you remember 8 Mile, right? And this is important to me. And I know I'm talking about 8 Mile during this evidence packet, going through, right? So I tell him, I'm like, Cheddar Bob tells Eminem, what are you going to say about everything he's going to say, right? Like, what if he mentions all this shit about you? And then Eminem, you remember, like, if you watched the movie, and I've watched it a million times, the look on Eminem's face, like it's like a light bulb goes off. You know what? I'm going to fucking tell him all myself, everything. I'll say everything that he's going to say. I'll put all of my shit out there. And then what do you got for me after that? And what happens? The guy freezes up, walks off stage because he had nothing else left to say. And I remember when I told Neil Smith, the 1900-year-old attorney that didn't care about it, he called it hanging. He said in the law world, and he had this weird accent, he was an old man. In the law world, we call that hanging a lantern on it. He said, and I can see why you'd want to hang a lantern on it. Thankfully, he retired, and Lloyd Matthews was past my case. But when I told Lloyd Matthews this, he disagreed. Lloyd Matthews, and I told him, listen, I've been sitting in this jail for 2 years, over 2 years, 2 months. I'm going to get up here and you're going to ask me the question. I gave Lloyd Matthews, I told him, I said, you can ask me any questions you want to, but here's a list of questions you must ask me. These list of questions ask me things like, have you ever done drugs? Yeah, I look at the jury. Yes, I was on meth. I was on pills. I did almost every drug you could think of for years. I was a drug addict. I tell them everything about myself, right? I tell them I had a history of being abused. I was abused sexually twice when I was a child, one at 3 and the other at 8, right? I tell them all this. I tell them everything about me. And the district attorney gets up there, and the only thing he's got left, right? The only thing he's got left, because when we talk about drugs and everything while I'm on the stand, my attorney also asked me, like, do you still do drugs? I'm like, yeah, I smoke weed. I said, until I got locked up, until the day I got locked up, I smoked weed. I smoked weed while we lived down there. I smoked weed when this rape was supposed to have occurred. I smoked weed. I've smoked weed for years. It's the only drug I never stopped doing, right? And I'm telling the jury all this. And that's one thing that my attorney did not want me to do. He's like, I don't think you should bring up anything about drugs unless if they don't bring it up, or if we don't bring it up, they can't bring it up. I said, we're bringing everything up. I'm Eminem in this situation. So we go through, we lay everything out on the table. The only thing that the district attorney has when he gets up, and it was pretty quick cross-examination, to be honest with you. It couldn't have been more than 15, 20 minutes that the district attorney cross-examined me before I got off the stand. The only thing he really tried to hit on, he said, and I remember this word for word too. He said, you like to get faded, right? I said, I don't know what you mean by that. He said, you like to smoke weed. I said, yeah. He said, maybe you got high one night and you walked past her room and you just had to have that. Maybe you were high on marijuana and you went in there and you raped this little girl. I said, sir, if I smoked weed, the only thing that has the possibility of being raped is maybe a chocolate cake. Exactly what I said. The jury busted out laughing. I put all of this on my daughter, right? And I hate to do that because of the material that we're covering, but I'm trying to just let you guys know how much truth I'm spilling to you right now. I'm telling you the truth about this discovery pack. I'm telling you the truth when I'm talking about the trial. Everything I'm telling you is 100% what happened. But I tell him the only thing that is in danger of getting raped is maybe a chocolate cake. The jury busts out laughing. He doesn't think it's funny. I go on to tell him, and my friend Barney, who was there in the gallery when, among other people that were on my side during my testimony, used to have me listed in his phone as the man who knows the effects of marijuana, because I said, sir, I don't know if you understand the effects of marijuana, but typically when you use marijuana, you don't get violent. I said, maybe that's not for everybody, but the vast majority of people that use marijuana are typically nonviolent when using it. I said, I've never heard of cases where people smoking weed and committing murders or rapes or, things of that nature violently because marijuana made them do it. I said, if you've got a case, son, and some of this is not verbatim, right? Some of this is exactly the points that I made, but maybe not exactly how I said it. But I did say, if you have any cases like that you would like to point to, then I'd be happy to take a look at them. And pretty much that was the end of I remember him kind of hanging up the hat. And even the sheriff's deputy that was security in the courtroom. So he wasn't like a deputy in the jail, right? I'd never met him until trial. He tells me the day that I took the stand, which is the same day they came back with the verdict, the same day that I went home. He tells me when they're bringing me back in to give the case to the jury, essentially the judge charges the jury, says, hey, here are the charges. Here's what you can do. Here's what you can't do. Here's what you can look at. Here's what you can't look at. Essentially, the deputy, he tells me, he says, yeah, man, that the district attorney said that he tried every way he could to shake you, but you wouldn't budge, man. He said he tried to get you riled up, but you wouldn't do it. They thought I was going to cuss him out or blow up on the stand because I'd done that on the detective, right? I've been preparing for this for over 2 years. One was prepared to tell the truth, tell my side of the story, which there was no story, and prepared for him to try to get me out of character. That wasn't going to happen in this situation. Okay. and I didn't let it happen. And he admitted that apparently to in front of this sheriff's deputy, who also told me when we came back for the verdict. So after they give the case to the jury, they go back for deliberations. They send me downstairs. They're thinking it's going to be, this is a Friday, right? So they're thinking this isn't going to be done today. I'm thinking I'm going to be in jail because they're not going to deliberate Saturday. They're going to take Saturday, Sunday off. This was the plan they came up with because the trial ended on Friday. So Friday they'll let the deliberations go until 5 o'clock or whatever the time they came up with, and then Saturday, Sunday they'll take off. Monday they'll come back and start deliberating until they come up with a verdict. They take me downstairs because they think that really I'm going to be going back. So essentially, I'm just going to sit downstairs until 5 o'clock, which is right below the courtroom. And the long hallway leads you back over to the jail side, underground, essentially. They take me downstairs. They hand me my sack. And then I hear on the radio, bring Mr. Quiros back upstairs. And I'm like, oh, shit. Oh, what does this mean? And so they put me on the elevator. They take me upstairs, and that same sheriff's deputy I'm talking about that told me that the district attorney couldn't shake me, he said they came up with a verdict. So my attorney didn't even come back there and tell me that. I didn't see my attorney until they shackled me up and took me out. Because at this point, so in front of the jury, the entire trial, I haven't been in shackles. They don't let you be in shackles in front of the jury. I'm in, trial clothes. I'm in, street clothes, what they call it. So, but the jury knows that I'm locked up. They know that I've been locked up. I say that I was locked up when I testify, right? Multiple people said I've been sitting in jail this entire time. So they're not, hidden to the fact that I've been in jail, but they've never seen me escorted out or anything like that. That every time they saw me, I was sitting at the table already when they came into the room and when they left the room. So they never saw me escorted in and out. And then when they bring you in for a verdict, because the only people that know the verdict are the jurors until the judge reads it. They put you in shackles. So this is the first time they shackled me during trial, right? So he's like, the verdict is in, the sheriff's deputy. And he says, all right, I'm put these leg shackles on you and these hand shackles. I'm like, wait. I start freaking out. Like, why are you shackling me up? Not only am I freaking out because my attorney told me if they come back quickly, it's bad sign. He told my family that. He told me that. So here it is, 15 to 30 minutes, something like that. And they're coming back with a verdict already. And I tell the deputy, like, why are you shackling me, man? Like, was I found guilty? He says, I don't know. He said, no, I don't think you're found guilty. He said, man, you're going home. Like, I remember this deputy telling me, you're going home, bro. Like, this dude believed me just as much as I believed in me by the end of this trial. So, and obviously the jury did too. Sorry, I got off on a rant there for probably 20, 30 minutes, but here we are. You probably already taken a look at the diagram. Lillian's room where she says the assault took place. Jared's room, Kayla's dad, Randy's brother. She says he was in this room when it happened. Randy and Aaron, she says, were in this room when it's supposed to have taken place, right? So this is where she says me and Kayla would have came in from smoking. At one point she's saying me and Kayla came in from smoking and I followed her to her room, hit her in the back of the head and rape her. And then later on she says Kayla and the baby were in the room, whatever. Down here she puts Jared, Randy, and Aaron all within approximately 15 feet of where she claims the rape took place, with an attack happening as she describes it, her, in parentheses, her being knocked out unconscious and presumably falling to the floor, followed by a subsequent rape. Someone would have heard that something was taking place. Yes, it is possible all this could have happened and no one would have heard it, but it is highly improbable. Yes, it's possible, highly improbable. Possibility versus probability. Let's move on, right? Okay, so essentially this is the second set of my handwritten notes that I rewrote when Lloyd Matthews died. What I'm going to do here, we're not going to read through all these. They essentially say the same thing. There might be some different wording. I might have added a few things. What I'll do is I'll scan through these if you want to. They really weren't expecting a 30-minute verdict. No, you're right. If you want to, you can pause this later on. You can come back later and try to read these. Hopefully you can, whatever. I'm not going to go through this because it says the same thing. We're going to get into the discovery pack, but I am going to stop here for a second so people can pause if they decide they want to do it later. Cake. Let me catch up on a few of this. That was during, I believe, every claim times. 2016 was the was that around the Me Too movement? I don't know. Maybe the Me Too movement was a little bit later. I do remember Trump running on something about I remember the Kentucky or the Duke Lacrosse case was somewhere around that time. There was a lot of cases that were used. I used to think that people living in good neighborhoods or the country that have security cameras has something to hide. I bought and put up cameras last week. Sure, there is always evidence, no matter what happens. Recording is always a good idea. Faded, right? That is the term that this white. Now, I don't understand. I've heard black gentlemen say that to me before. Man, shit, I faded as hell. What are you talking about? Like, so people have said that. I've heard people say that. This is a white nerdy guy. He looks at me and says, "You like to get faded, right?" And I knew what he meant, but I wanted him to say it. And I said, "I don't know exactly what you mean, sir." Cake. Yeah, I did say that. I actually made the jury laugh a couple times while I was on the stand. Um, they really weren't expecting it. Were they triple insulated interior walls? No, this was a house from the 1950s. In fact, I could hear. So let me slide back a few pages actually. So this is our bedroom. Our bed was about right here. Now this is Randy and Aaron's room. This is the laundry room in between our room. If we had nothing going on in here, like our TV wasn't going or whatever, even if we were talking, we could still hear their TV, which would have been about right here. Our bed's like right over here, and we could still hear their TV, which would have been about right here through the walls, through the laundry room, through two sets of walls. So no, they weren't triple insulated. I'm impressed how many words you fit on one page. I didn't have a whole lot of pieces of paper, Katie. It would mean that everyone in the house was faded if they couldn't hear it. True. Duke Lacrosse was BS. Absolutely. I'm watching Too Old and White. Okay. So let's get back to, okay, again, maybe I didn't go through all these. I'm going to slide back through and again, just kind of pause. Where is that at? So this is the second set. I'm going to slide back through again. You can pause these through them, whatever you want to. I'm going back up again just to give anybody a chance to look at the second set of the same like notes that I wrote down to my next lawyer, right? Because I didn't know that Neil Smith passed those first set of handwritten notes on Boyd Matthews. So I rewrote all this shit without, and again, I'm saying I told my story to more people than she did while I was in jail, right? I told this story to more people. I told my story more times than she did. She told her story once and then got on the stand and told many different parts of the story. So there we go. This one was only like 3 pages. I fit everything on there. I probably had very few pages. So first, this is the first piece in this discovery pack. So this is the public defender's office. They reach out to Kayla. This is actually over a year into me being incarcerated. So the reason why this is more than a year after my arrest is because I had a paid attorney for a while, right? So when I fire him, it gets turned over to the public defender's office. They appoint a public defender. Again, the public defender's office is the only person that ever reached out to anybody in that house for an interview. And they reached out to Kayla, my fiance at the time. So here's the interview of their summary of the interview with Kayla. These are the people that are supposed to be on my team. This is LaShawn Woods. I believe LaShawn Woods was like the head public defender or something like that. Or maybe she was like the second public defender, but she was up there as far as the public defender's office goes. She wasn't the one that was like handling my case, but I guess they were trying to just process it through their system and figure out who it was going to go to or whatever. So they call Kayla and they ask Kayla, questions. So Kayla tells them she took care of Lillian most of the time, which was true. She was at home the night of the alleged incident because Lillian says everybody was at home, right? By her own admission. The walls were very thin and you could hear through the walls. We just talked about that. Lillian wrote in her diary that she had sex and used drugs. Oh, by the way, I've been raped. So that was kind of, weird. Again, we had talked about all this. And actually, by this time, me and Kayla are already broken up. She actually cheated on me. She told me the day after she cheated on me, she told me on the phone, listen, this happened. And I was like, look, I broke down. It hurt. But I remember telling her, I can't do anything for you in here. I understand, my life is on pause and your life isn't. You got our daughter. All I care about is you keep, her safe and you stay okay and do whatever you have to do. I don't care. It is what it is. We'll figure everything out later. And, I won't talk about how everything played out afterwards, but, Defendant's name, my name was not in the diary. Lillian had hated her mother's boyfriend, Randy, who was the uncle of Kayla. Lillian had some behavior psychiatric issues. She attempted suicide when her mother moved away and left her. Lillian spent some time in a psychiatric ward. So Kayla just knows all this. This is all the stuff. The psychiatric ward was the same stay, I believe, from when the accusations were made. Aaron didn't enroll Lillian in school when she was 12 years of age. DFACS got involved. Aaron was encouraged to give her mother custody of Lillian. We talked about the DFACS case, right? Where they come and interviewed everybody in the house, supposedly 2 months after she was supposed to have been raped, but there's never a mention of rape. All the accusations were about her mother. Lillian's grandmother read her diary and reported the rape to police. There are 4 bedrooms in the house. 3 of the bedrooms are side by side. Bedroom 1, Lillian's room. Bedroom 2, Jared, Kayla's father. Bedroom 3, Aaron and Randy's room. Kayla's room was on the other side of the kitchen where the garage was. It was a garage, but it was converted into a bedroom. Kayla now lives in South Daytona, Florida. She had moved down there with her parents. She wants to know if any STD testing was done, believes if Lillian tested positive for an STD and Kiros did not, then that would prove his innocence. Again, we've been told early on that one of the pages said that she tested positive for gonorrhea. When you look at it, it actually doesn't. But I didn't know how to read any of that. And even now I couldn't tell you like, this is what that part means, but we'll look at it and you can, decide for yourself. People that lived in the house: Aaron, Randy, Kayla, Stephen Shane Kiros, that's me, Jared, Kayla's 2-year-old daughter, and Lillian. So this is just the certification of records, GSAC, Gwinnett Children's Advocacy Center, saying, hey, basically we're taking over this case. We're going to be the custodian of this records. We'll be dealing with law enforcement. You can pause and read that if you want to. This is the Georgia Victims Crime Compensation Program. Couldn't really tell you what this is. Provides that a victim shall have the right to forensic medical examination, regardless of whether the victim participates in the criminal justice system or cooperates with law enforcement by pursuing prosecution of the crime. A victim is not required to pay directly or indirectly. So I guess this is just saying, hey, we're going to do all this for you for free, no matter whether you want to, cooperate, don't cooperate, whatever. Obviously, essentially, she cooperated until we got the trial, which I truly believe that she sandbagged the prosecution. I believe she did what she could without admitting that she lied to make sure that she wasn't believed, essentially. And I'll go to my grave thinking that, no matter what anybody says. Obviously, we blocked out her last name, Clayton County, Morrow. You can pause and read that. Sane sexual assault nurse examiner, Kathy Carter. So that was a sexual assault nurse. That's the one that did the examination. Kathy Carter, that's the one that took the stand and said, yeah, her hymen was intact and all that. Kelly Burtz, I believe, was the one that did the forensic interview where they talked to Lillian on the recording. So Gwinnett Sexual Assault Center and Children's Advocacy Center, Child Sexual Assault Medical Assessment. I think this is just her age, her date of birth, where she lives, all that good stuff. Reported to DFACS, yes. Reported to law enforcement, yes. Interviewed previously by this time, yes. Contact Detective Langley, contact Kelly Burtz, alleged perpetrator, Shane Kiros, mid-20s. You can obviously read all this. Mom's ex-boyfriend, niece's husband, C-type narrative for patient history. Consent for release of information. So this is saying, hey, Lily's mom and grandmother, Aaron and Shirley, authorized the DA's office of Clayton County to release confidential information regarding Lillian to the Gwinnett Sexual Assault Center, just saying that they're going to participate, once all this stuff with the initial appearance, preliminary hearing, grand jury, arraignment, trial, and sentencing, all this would be turned over. Anything that happened in my case throughout the 2 years and 2 months of my case would all be, basically back and forth between GSAC and Clayton County Police Department. They were working in conjunction. That's all this says. This is the Child Medical Forensic Services. Not required authorization for exam. This is authorization for the exams to be done on her, right? So history of complaint, C-type narrative, which we'll get to. That's Kathy Carter's initials. The household occupants, these are the three people that lived there: Shirley, the grandmother; Brent, who was the uncle, I believe is what the U means; and Aaron, the mother; and then Lillian. Obviously, they all lived in the same house at the time that this was done. Right. Let me stop for a second. Maybe a part two for the rest. I'm thinking about it, DG. And if you can't stay, then you might. I don't know. I'm in it for now. So if you can't stay, you might have to just come back and finish it later. I understand, guys. Listen, it's been 2 hours already. I'm normally asleep by 8 o'clock on nights that I have to work the next day, which I have to work tomorrow and be up by 4. But I'm in it, so I might just finish it, and you guys can just finish this at your leisure. Uh, you don't have to watch it all now, but it'll be there if you want to come back and finish the rest, right? You don't have to stay here for the live. I completely understand. It's getting late. People got things to do tomorrow. People got things to do tonight. It's Friday night. Somebody wants to drink, have a good time, kick back, watch a game, or whatever you want to do. I get it. But I thought about doing a part two. I think I'm just going to finish it because I'm less than an hour. There's really not a whole lot to stop with on this. I'm in for the long haul. L3, I love you, bro. I love you more than you know, Staff Sergeant retired. So this is law enforcement agency. This is just saying, I believe, patient name and date of birth. What would this be? November 2nd. What happened November 2nd? I believe November 2nd is the forensic medical exam. Yes. So this is the day. So September 23rd or September 30th, we're not sure, right? She goes to the hospital. A couple days later, Shirley finds the diary. Let's just say October 1st, Shirley finds the diary. A couple days after, Shirley confronts her. Then we get all the way to November 2nd. So more than a month after she said, hey, Shane raped me, now we're getting to finally somebody's going to sit down and ask her what happened. So, early October, she's saying I raped her. November 2nd, we're getting to, they sit down. The patient arrived to the center accompanied by her mother, Erin, grandmother, Shirley, for a scheduled forensic medical exam as requested by Detective Langley. As you'll see later, it was actually Shirley, the grandmother, who requested that GSAC do the interview. And they were going to do this exam. This is the medical exam, not the interview. But it was Shirley that requested that they do the interview instead of the detectives. They felt like she was going to be more comfortable with GSAC, and I believe they had already been, like talking to them since she'd been in the mental hospital or whatever, because GSAC's not where she was at the mental hospital. They just got involved after she said she was raped in the mental hospital. Prior to the exam, the patient was interviewed by a forensic interviewer, Kelly Burks. Yes, so this both happened the same day. And like I said, during this forensic interview where she's telling the story, she says, again, let's jump back to my notes. I don't remember if anything came out of me. Then during this medical exam where they're actually examining her physically, she actually tells Kathy Carter, after she's told Kelly Burks, I don't remember anything coming out of me. Less than an hour later, she tells Kathy Carter, I experienced some slight bleeding or something like that, right? History of events as recalled by the patient. The patient states she was raped by her mom's boyfriend's niece's husband named Shane. We weren't married, but she said I was her husband, whatever. During the summer prior to going into the 7th grade, 2014. She states Shane came into her room. So again, she says this happened June or July or August even, because all here she says it was the summer going into 7th grade of 2014. So June, July, or August, which she says in her statement, June or July. She doesn't say August because she wasn't in our house in August, other than maybe a day or two, because she was supposed to have been enrolled in school in August. And I remember that was one of the things that got her removed, was the fact she told her grandmother that she wasn't in school. So I know that August was when she left our house and was placed with the grandmother. Going into 7th grade, 2014, that's when the rape supposed to have occurred. Again, we're all the way in November 2nd, 2015, when this is all kind of coming out. She states Shane came into her room close to midnight one evening and hit her in the back of the head. Quote, I passed out. When I woke up, he was on top of me. End quote. Again, I told you, some of these things that we're going to read, they're going to be graphic. And if they were true, they would be horrific, right? And of course, many things have happened to people like this, and that's terrible. And again, I was sexually abused twice. Nothing to the extent of this. I just something that I would talk about, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into it. It's something that I'm not ashamed of. I've never had an issue. I outcried pretty immediately on both of those occasions, actually. Which not to say that everybody does. There are people, there's been tons of instances where people waited years to outcry, right? And the cases, uh, you can look at them and be like, yeah, that probably happened. Maybe because the alleged perpetrator had a history of things like this, had other people that accused them of it either before or since it supposedly happened when it comes out. In a real case where it really happens, right? We're just hypotheticals here, exploring hypotheticals. So let's say it really happened. Some of these things are going to be graphic, and I just want to warn people that watch this later, people that are watching now, like this might trigger you a little bit. But again, you have to remember this story is fabricated. It is 100% false. Other than her mother was a bad mother and wasn't taking care of her. The patient states she woke up on her back with her shirt on and her pants and underwear off. She states Shane had his penis inside of her vagina. She states she felt pain in her vaginal area, rating it a 6 on the 1 to 10 pain scale, and states she felt a burning sensation when she urinated. The patient states she also noticed she was bleeding a little bit following the above contact. The patient states Shane did not wear a condom and ejaculated inside of her vagina. She denies any type of oral or anal contact. She states Shane threatened to hurt her if she told anyone, stating the first person that she told was her friend Joyce in the 8th grade. So again, okay, this is Kathy Carter, the person that does the physical exam on her. She's already talked to Kelly Burks. She tells Kelly Burks, I don't remember anything coming out of me. Less than an hour later, she tells Kathy Carter that there was a burning sensation when she urinated, and she also noticed she was bleeding a little bit following the above contact. And again, she mentions Joyce, who was apparently uncooperative when they finally found her and the other friends that she supposedly told. They were just uncooperative. So Joyce or none of those friends were ever testified at my trial. They never gave statements. They were never even mentioned other than saying they were uncooperative. Let's remember that. I'm just going back over some of these things now that we're getting to them in this actual packet, right? Just going back over my interpretation of this packet. So this is a symptom review. Note all this, question mark, wet pants frequently. This was actually an issue she had while living with us at 12 years old. So I guess at the same time, more than a year later, she was still having this issue. Now, wetting pants is a sign of sexual abuse. I'm not saying that means that she was sexually abused by somebody. I know she wasn't sexually abused by me, but wetting pants is actually one of the signs of sexual abuse. So it's possible she was abused in some type of way. I'm not going to say she wasn't. What we do know for a fact is that her hymen was intact and completely normal. That we do know for a fact. But it's possible something else happened to her, and maybe she fabricated all this because she didn't want to tell the real story. Maybe she didn't want to out the real person. I don't know. There's tons of theories, right? I'm just giving you the facts as they were presented to me and the jury. Meds initially on Prozac, stopped and placed on Effexor plus Thorazine. Thorazine is like lithium, like for bipolar disorder. Trazodone as needed for sleep. Experiences panic attacks at night, upped appetite, stress eats. She was already kind of overweight. As I told you, she was bullied for being overweight. She was stress eating. It's not like she's stress eating because I raped her, or she says that I raped her or whatever. I'm a stress eater. A lot of people are stress eaters, whatever. But this is just some of the things, they have as symptoms that they look at. And I'm sure they do this in many cases where these things actually happen. I'm sure that these are many of the things that actually come along with it. I agree. Mom has been in and out of patient's life. Again, another mention of the mom. Patient self-injures and has OCD behaviors. Currently using THC. Again, she's like 13 years old when all this is going on. 13, or maybe she's turned 14 by this time. I don't know. I don't remember. But she tells them she's currently using THC, but she also told them she had sex. She also says in her diary that she had sex, right? Psychologist, JNPT, I'm not sure, in Lakeview, followed by initiative output and half day program. I think that's inpatient in Lakeview. She was an inpatient in Lakeview, followed by intensive outpatient and half day program. So she was in inpatient in Lakeview for a while and then was in the day program. Um, Currently seeing something a week. I'm guessing seeing her doctor however many times a week she was or whatever. Let's go on to the next one. This is the forensic medical evaluation. Again, some of the stuff I'm just gonna, let you pause and you can kind of read through. Uh, Vaginal only, penile penetrations. It was a sexual assault, no physical handicap. Says she was a child, this, that, and third. Where it happened, who it's supposed to be in, mom's, boyfriend's, niece's husband, right? How many assailants? Just one. Description: I'm in my 20s, male, Caucasian. Uh, Assaulted, so type of force used, physical, assaulted, hitting back of the head, quote unquote. Happened a single time. Um, so this is, what's interesting. What time frame between the assault and the crisis intervention? Within 24 hours, within 48, within 72, after 72. So the reason this is important, and as far as crisis intervention and police contact, is because 72 hours or before, they can find that's really their window to find physical evidence from a sexual assault is 72 hours. Anything after 72 hours, you're really not going to have much physical evidence, even if it really happened, right? Other than in this case, you would have had her hymen broken and things like that, which wasn't the case that we found out at trial. Again, I don't know that she is a virgin and her hymen is intact while I'm reading through all this dozens of times while I'm in jail. I don't find that out until my trial when Kathy Carter is on the stand saying her hymen is intact. And I'm just mind blown sitting at the table. So that's important. Of course, it was more than a year later, so there never would have been any physical evidence, even if it were a true account of what happened, which it's not. So this is the page. So again, I'm not a doctor. I can't explain to you what all this means. You can take it, screenshot it, look it up, research it yourself. But I can tell you what they said it meant on the stand. What Kathy Carter, right here, the sexual assault nurse examiner, sane nurse, what they call them, Kathy Carter, exactly what she said on the stand. Now, I don't have my trial transcript. That's $4,000 or $5,000 to get trial transcripts. So I've never gotten it because although I want it, I've never gotten it because it's very expensive to have it transcribed. But here's her findings. Now, Tanner stage, don't know what any of this means. Breast, genitals, don't know what a Tanner stage is. Couldn't tell you. Still couldn't tell you. I could probably look it up. Never did, never have. Don't care. Medical aspect of thighs. All this means normal and then abnormal. So these are normal findings. These are abnormal findings. So all this is normal so far. Medical aspect of thighs normal. Perineum, don't know what it is. Never looked it up, even since my case. I've never taken this page and looked it up. All I know is what Kathy Carter said on the stand that made 12 jurors decide that she was a virgin. I can't even pronounce that, right? But yes, clear to whitish, thick, normal finding, whatever it is. Discharge, some kind of discharge. Labia majora, normal. Clitoris, normal. Labia minora, normal. Whatever that is, tissue, normal. Perhymenal tissue, normal. Vestibule. Hymen is annular. Still couldn't tell you what annular means. I'm not a doctor. I haven't gone through and looked at all this. And you would think I would have by now, but I know what Kathy Carter said on the stand, and I know what got me found not guilty. So I never had to research it, right? I got it straight from her mouth. But annular, look it up. So her hymen is normal, annular, vertical. Now, my original attorney thought, for whatever reason, vertical meant that it was broken, horizontal meant that it was intact. No, this just means some women have a horizontal, some women have one that's vertical. It's different, right? But again, posterior fourchette, which is a part of the hymen, normal. Vagina, they just marked it out. Marked all this out. Anal tone, normal. Method of exam, observation. Anal dilation, normal. Anal tags, no. Anal fissures, no. Knee chest, whatever. Anal evaluation. So summary of evidence, there was no kit collected because it was after 72 hours, so they're not doing a rape kit, right? They're just looking at her to see what they find. Which what they find is this entire page is evidence of innocence. This entire page is what essentially set me free at the end of all this. And this lady, Kathy Carter, getting up here and testifying to this, even though she says later on in like her final analysis of this, the history is consistent, or it's normal and consistent with the history given of rape. All of this right here says different. Everything that she went through during this exam says this didn't happen. Yet, just because, and this is her own words when she was on the stand, just because Lillian said that it burned when she peed and she experienced some slight bleeding, that's why she said it was consistent with the history given of a rape. So, anyways, you can pause and read that. Again, this is kind of graphic, but patient examined, however, positioning with adequate visualization, hymenal rim explored with cotton tip swab and found to be smooth and continuous. Patient tolerated the exam without complaint. Again, this is also saying her hymen is intact. Pause it and read it if you want to. These are the facts, folks. These are the facts as they were presented to me. These are the facts as they were given to my attorneys. This is the facts as they were put in front of the judge and jury. These are the facts that sent me home. So some of you, I'll never change your mind. There are many people that will watch this video after it's done, and your mind will never change about me. And that's fine. Okay? You don't have to change your mind about me. Some of you hate me because I'm a First Amendment auditor. I'm a constitutional not law scholar. I was about to say what Chili said, just because I actually watched a couple of videos about Chili, who I actually don't agree with on most things. I'm a constitutional activist. That's what I call myself, because of this situation. And I'm looking directly at the camera because I want you. A lot of times I'm looking down here because I want to see what you're seeing. But when I'm telling you, like, I'm looking directly at the camera, like, I'm trying to get a point across to you more than any of the other points that I care about, right? Again, this is evidence of innocence. Pertinent medical history. Again, you can pause and read all this. The only thing I'm really going to point out is this is where she says the patient gives a history outcry of inappropriate sexual contact in the form of penile to vaginal penetration occurring one time in the summer of 2014. She describes feeling pain and experiencing slight bleeding. This resolved quickly. This something description is consistent with mild and superficial injury, which resolves quickly and leaves no detectable residue finding. The exam is normal and consistent with the history given. So you just looked at her. You've just seen that her hymen was completely intact. You just examined her hymen with a cotton swab, right? And not only that, later on, a couple years later, you get on the stand and say, yeah, she's completely normal. Everything points to her not having sex, except for her saying it burned when I pee and I bled a little bit, which again, an hour before in the interview, before this exam's done, just to remind you, she tells Kelly Burks, I didn't notice anything coming out of me. But here she's saying something different. And again, that's why she says it's normal and consistent with the history given, only because she said it burned when she peed and there was a little bit of blood afterwards. So again, you can pause and read. Is where they, oh yeah, this is where somebody, I believe it was my first paid lawyer, said that she tested positive for chlamydia. But not detected. She didn't test positive for any STDs or anything like that. Again, because she was a virgin. This is the HIV test that they did on her. You can pause and read. This is Quest Diagnostics, like the lab test, blood test they did on her. Again, you can pause and read. There's nothing of substance here. So all this is the keeper of the records, to any and all. This is going to hospitals, schools, guidance counselors. Like they sent this to everybody in her school. Mainly is what this was for. Was that you are authorized and directed to give them any and all information you have about Lillian, so they can go through her school behavior, grades, all that good stuff. So again, pause and read. Pictures of the house from the outside that my mom went down and took before trial. She took pictures of the inside, but those are for some reason aren't in here. Um, just sideways pictures of the house actually. But again, you can pause those if you want to look at them. This is the front door. This would have been what would have been the garage, but had been converted into a bedroom. This is normally how I came in and out of the house, was through our bedroom door. Oftentimes I use this door, but you know, again, this house always had somebody in it. And I don't mean just like Lily was there by herself. Actually never there alone. And I don't think there was ever a time anybody in this house was ever alone, to be honest with you. Because Jared was always there in his bedroom. Randy was always there in his bedroom. When Erin lived there, she was always there in Randy's bedroom. Like they stayed back there, all three of them on pills all day, every day. That's all they did. Watch TV and take pills. That's it. They didn't even drink. All they did was take pills. Potential witnesses: Randy, Jared, maybe impeached for rehab. This was at the time. This was after the outcry. So both of them had ended up going to rehab. I have no idea about them to this day. I have no contact with them. Before I was arrested, more than a year before I was arrested, it was the last time I talked to either one of these, which is funny when you find out what happens after I got arrested, which I didn't find out about till after I got out of jail. This was Edward. This is Kayla's grandfather. He took me to work after the car blew up, like I talked about earlier. Again, we're going to keep moving through this. This is just the page about discovery, them turning over discovery, what all is in the discovery file: police report, medical reports, warrants, alibi, demand, witness statements, which were no witness statements other than Shirley's, and she wasn't a witness to anything, right? Other than finding the diary. And again, this is just saying, hey, this is what discovery is. This is what we've turned over. This is how they turned it over to Neil Smith. So this is 2017, March 17th, 2017. Not long before I had fired my paid lawyer, I had went with the public defender's office. So this is the time that the DA's office said, okay, here Neil Smith is the 1900-year-old guy that was trying to get me to take a plea deal, hang the lantern on it. He's the first public defender to get my case, right? So this is just saying how they gave him the discovery file once he got the case. I posted this on a community page. This is the only plea deal I heard or was offered until right before trial started. Right before we picked the jury, actually, they offered me a plea deal, which I'll tell you at the end of this because it's pretty sweet. Actually, I'll tell you here in just a minute when we get to the warrant affidavits. But this is just saying, hey, these are the charges. This was my paid attorney still. This was at the status hearing where they talked about the girls that she first told that were uncooperative. So they give him this then. That was the only time I ever heard a plea deal until we got the trial. No, this was at my preliminary hearing, March 15th, 2016. My status hearing was July 7th, I believe, but this was March 15th. So this was my preliminary evidentiary hearing. So this is where they came up with the, hey, he can take a plea deal right now, 25 years to serve, after they bound it over to Superior Court, said, yeah, there's enough evidence for this to go to the next judge. All this is the true bill from me being indicted by a grand jury. Pause and read if you want. This was the list of jurors, grand jurors, blocked out all their names. There's no reason to dox anybody, right? But the grand jurors aforesaid, the name on behalf of the citizens of the state of Georgia, charge and accuse Stephen Shane Quiros with the offense of rape in violation of OCGA 1661 for the said accused person in the county of Clayton in the state of Georgia between the 1st day of June 2014 and the 31st day of July 2014. Again, she says it happened somewhere between June and July. The exact date of the offense being unknown to the grand jury, did have carnal knowledge of Lillian, a female, forcibly against her will. The grand jurors aforesaid. So all this is saying, this is the grand jury, and some of you may have heard before, there's an old saying, you can indict a ham sandwich. Um, a grand jury can indict you. So what happens at a grand jury is the state essentially goes and says, hey, listen, you guys, this is what we have so far. Your lawyer doesn't get to be there. You don't get to be there. It's just the state, a judge, and the grand jury. This is what we have. Do you think it's enough for us to go ahead and arrest this guy? So that's what all these say. So we'll go on to the next page, which is just the next counts. It says the same as that thing, except for this one's for child molestation. You can pause and read. It says the same as that thing, except for this was for false imprisonment, which you can pause and read. It says the same as that thing, except for this is simple battery, family violence. Not because we were supposed to be family members, just because we lived in the same house when it's supposed to have happened, right? So for the only other plea deal I ever heard, and I don't have a piece of paper just like the other one, because they didn't do it like that. What they did was the day we picked the jury, they talked to my attorney, and they said, you tell him he's been sitting in jail for 2 years and 2 months, right? Right? I don't know how they said it. I'm just paraphrasing at this point to get to what they offered me. They said, he's been sitting there for 2 years and 2 months. We'll give him the opportunity. He can plead right now before we pick this jury. This is the only time. This they did say. This is the only time he's going to hear it. Not only did they say this, but before we pick the jury, like my lawyer tells me all this in the back room. And then when we get out there to start picking the jury, the DA reiterates that they've made me this offer in front of the judge on the record to make sure that I understand that once we start picking the jury, they're going to take this offer off the table. So they're trying their best to get me to take this offer. They tell me I can plead to false imprisonment, right? So the sentence they offered me for false imprisonment was 10 years. Now, 10 years prison. In Georgia, false imprisonment is a nonviolent crime. And for nonviolent crimes in Georgia, typically 99% of the time for nonviolent crimes, you do 35%, I believe, is the typical. So on 10 years, normally you would do like 3.5 years. I've been in jail for 2 years and 2 months. They tell me not only will we let you plead to false imprisonment, we'll give you a 10-year sentence. We'll give you credit for the 2 years and 2 months time served. We'll suspend the next year or so, whatever the 35% was. We'll suspend that, and you'll spend the next 7.5 years on probation. You can leave today. You don't have to register as a sex offender. This is the deal they offered me. You don't have to register as a sex offender. You can leave today, essentially with 7.5 years probation, but we're doing a 10-year sentence, 10-year prison sentence, suspended, given to probation. Plead to false imprisonment, no other charge. I turned it down, went to trial, faced life plus 20 years and won. But again, the only way I can prove this to you is if I get the trial transcripts. Maybe one day I will. I don't know. But this was said on the record that they didn't give my attorney. They may have given him a piece of paper. I don't know. I know they talked about it. He came up and talked to me about it. And I think it was right on the fly, right? Because it was like really quick. My attorney, I'd already talked to him like before he come back and talked to me and told me this. Like we had talked that morning already before we picked the jury. And then we get out there to pick the jury. He says, look, this is his last chance. I just want to make sure on the record, Judge, that he knows that he's being offered this, that he's knowingly turning this deal down. We've never offered a deal like this, whatever he said. But there is proof of this. All you would have to do is pay whatever it costs to get the voir dire, which is the jury selection part of the trial transcript, which is probably around $1,000, I would say. Maybe less. It was only one day. So false imprisonment says all this. Again, you can pause and read. Simple battery, family violence, and the last one, simple assault, family violence. This is all the charges that the grand jury indicted me on. Witnesses' names and addresses. So these are the witnesses that the state had listed. Well, I guess I should have went through this. I'm not going to go back to that page. This is the state warrant. Jennifer Langley, Detective Langley, did accuse Stephen Shane Quiros, did have criminal knowledge. This is her taking all the warrants out on me. Again, you can pause and read. So this is another one for that says the same exact thing essentially for the next. This is after they get in the grand jury indictment. They start taking the warrants. It says the same thing. It's just different charges. Says the same thing. It's just different charges. Um, Again, says the same thing, just different charges. Says the same thing, just different charges. Pause and read these if you want to. Magistrate Court of Clayton County, application for criminal arrest warrant. This is just where Jennifer Langley went in and said, hey, I'm applying for this arrest warrant. I haven't applied to any other judge. I haven't taken this in front of any other judge. This is what we have. This is what we need. This is what we want. They got the arrest warrant. This is the probable cause, what she gave for the arrest warrant. You can pause and read all this. They all say the exact same thing. And this is actually the only place, like I said, there's all those, God, we're 2.5 hours in, man. If I didn't do it, I'm not admitting to it ever. I told every attorney that I had, I would never accept any plea deal. You can tell me I can go home just like they did. I told every attorney I had that same thing. You can tell me I can go home today if I say I did it. I won't say it. So again, all this is all the same. This is actually where she says that I think this is where it was. Yeah. When told of the allegations made against him being of a sexual assault, Kiro stated that he knew what the incident was, and it was in reference to a 12-year-old not being taken care of that lived in his home at the time. That's the only place. Again, when we're almost to the parts where she has all her little summaries, right? So she has summaries of our voicemails that, hey, Kiro's called and left me a voicemail. Here's a summary, the date, the time. One sentence long. But she doesn't have the summary of that phone call. Yet she lists it here, but she doesn't put the summary of that phone call in here for whatever reason. I don't know. Again, you can pause and read all this. All this is her probable cause that she presented for her warrants. Again, I'm going to scroll through. You can pause and read. Again, same thing, says the same thing, just different charges. So all this is the incident report, incident types. This is the location where it's supposed to have happened, the complainant's name, which was actually her grandmother was the complainant at the time initially. The victim juvenile information. So this is all her information. Obviously, there's not a lot to see here. Case status active. Suspect information, Shane Kiros. At this time, whenever they filled all this out, the only thing they had was my name. I think they had maybe they had my driver's license number, or maybe they got it later. I'm not sure. Girlfriend is Taylor Daniel. I don't care if she's out. She's not even on Facebook. That's not even her last name anymore. So here's where the summary starts. It begins with the whole outcry, the whole Shirley contacting Clayton County, all that. On Tuesday, October 20th, 2015, again, September 23rd or September 30th is when Lillian's supposed to have gone. This Detective Langley, says it was September 23rd. Shirley says it was September 30th. That Lily has been admitted to the hospital, and then later outcries rate. Tuesday, October 20th, sent a request to the GBI JISAT. This is just saying she sent in for separate photo lineups, which actually is the only part of the investigation that I believe was done properly. They actually, when you look at the photo lineups, you'll be like, hey, are those your brothers? Like the photo lineups were done the right way. It was the best job that they did in this investigation. The only part of this investigation they did correctly and was, I believe, proper. But that wasn't for me to decide. That's for the jury. And you guys, if you want to. All this is Georgia GBI, Georgia Information Sharing Analysis Center, request for information. She's requesting that here's his name. We need all of his information. They have my driver's license number at that time. Let's get all the information that JISAC has on him. On Tuesday, October 20th, same day, she made contact with Shirley, advised her that she was a detective assigned to her case. So again, September 23rd, and then it's all the way October 20th when she's, let's say it was September 30th. Let's push it all the way forward a week. It's all 20 days. And so it was even a couple of days after, let's say she went to the hospital on the 30th. I think that's what Shirley says, the 30th. And Langley says the 23rd. So let's say September 30th, 2015, she goes to the hospital. Shirley says she finds it, the diary, and confronts her with it a couple days later. So let's put it at October 2nd. It's still 18 days before a detective even reaches out and says, hey, I'm assigned to the case. Shirley advised that she'd been in her care since late 2014. She advised Lillian used to live with her mother at the address, along with several others in the home. And the residence was a known drug house. This isn't true. It wasn't a known drug house. I smoked marijuana outside. I was the only one that smoked weed in the house. I mean, not in the house, but I was the only one in the house who smoked weed. I smoked cigarettes and weed outside. Um, the reason she says it was a known drug house, right, is because Randy, Aaron, and Jared were all talked about when Lily goes to her grandmother and says, hey, mom's doing this, doing that, doing this, doing that. She tells them about all the pills that they're taking. She's not being taken care of, this and that. That's where that came from. It wasn't a known drug house. Nobody ever came there to sell or buy drugs. The only drugs that they consumed were their prescription drugs, which they abused. And really they would only abuse their prescription drugs for maybe a week or two, because it's not like they ever had enough to make it. You know what I mean? They did some doctor hopping at the time. They tried to, but this was actually around the time 2014 would have been around the time that they started doing the whole number for doctors' offices, like the federal number on it. They catch you if you're doctor hopping, right? Somewhere around that time, or maybe even before. But at this time, like they'll go a few weeks taking pills and stuff, and then there'll be a few weeks without them suffering. That's really what they're all three. Well, mainly Randy and Jared. That was what their cycle was essentially. But it wasn't a known drug house. That was a lie. The suspect lived in the residence with another female, and possibly had a baby at the time of the incident. I don't know why they're saying it was possible we had a baby. Lily knew we had a baby. Shirley, I'm sure, knew we had a baby. I've never met Shirley. The only time I'd ever seen her was at my preliminary hearing a month after I was arrested, and at my trial, like 1 or 2 of the days she was there. She took the stand one day or whatever. Shirley stated Lillian was taken to the hospital. Lily says September 23rd. Again, Langley somewhere in here says it was September 30th. Just another example of how poorly Langley did this investigation. Diagnosed with anxiety, depression, has panic attacks. She's been cutting her arms. While obtaining clothing for Lillian, Shirley located a notebook in Lillian's dresser drawer and read that she had been raped. On Friday, September 25th, Lily advised the social worker, again, the social worker that was never, ever mentioned again, other than right here, that she had been raped. Lillian is currently being treated at Lakeview Behavioral Health. Her medical doctor is so-and-so, PA's Karen, and Tara Medin, whatever. Shirley had concerns about whether Lillian was ready for a forensic interview or not, and inquired if the behavioral center could conduct it. I advised her I would make contact with both Aaron Carter and Tara and speak with them to see if they had any further recommendations. So here it is, more than a month, and they're still, like, Shirley's wondering if she's ready for an interview. Like, me personally, I'd be like, why is it a month and we haven't done an interview already? But whatever. You can take it how you want. Shirley advised the home Lillian was staying in at the time of the incident was under investigation by social services DFATS, and her caseworker was Sharon Perry. The house wasn't under investigation. Lily's mom was under investigation. None of our names were ever on any of that paperwork, other than we admitted to the lady when she came. We talked to her. We did an interview with her. We agreed with Lily about everything she said, even though I'd never seen her again. Once she went to her grandmother's and said that, this DFATS lady comes. I say, yeah, she's telling y'all the truth. Her mom's a piece of shit. And we kicked them out not too long after that. But yeah, everything she said about her mom when DFATS got involved, her mom says the home was under, or Shirley says the home was under investigation by social services. No, the home was not. Her mom was under investigation by social services. DFATS has never been involved in my life, my baby mama's life, my daughter's life, none of that. So the only social services was dealing with Lillian and her mom. And again, 2 months after she's supposed to have been raped, but they're talking about her mom. On October 20th, I made contact with Tiara Lakeview, spoke to her about Lillian. Tiara stated Lillian recently had her medication changed and she would like for me to call her back October 26th, 28th. Let's give it another, more than a week, right? Another week or so to see how she's adjusting and if she's ready for the forensic interview. So it's already been over a month. Let's give it another week. Cool, whatever. On Wednesday, October 21st, 2015, at approximately 8:10, I received an email with the information I requested from JISAT. The lineups will be provided for the used for identification for the suspect. Sorry. On October 27th, I made contact. So she calls her back. Hey, she ready for the? She appeared to be adjusting to her medication. Feels like she should be ready for a forensic interview. October 27th, 2015. On October 27th, made contact with GSAC and scheduled a forensic interview for November 2nd. So let's give it another week, right, before we sit down and talk. It's already been over a month. Let's just keep pushing off weeks. So the actual time they sat down and did the forensic interview and the exam was November 2nd. Read or had her wrote. I don't know what you mean by that. Maybe I'm just not understanding. I don't get it. I'm sure you're trying to either say something to me or ask me something, but I'm not sure what it was. But October 27th, Langley made contact with Shirley, advised her the forensic interview was scheduled for November 2nd at GSAC. So this is the Detective Langley sits down, watches the DVD interview that Kelly Burks did with Lily, right? And that's the name I always knew her by. Sometimes I called her Lillian during this. Sometimes I call her Lily, whatever. In our house, she was called Lily. I'm thinking Grandma found the diary and had her write it. I think that's a possibility. I think the more likely scenario is that Lily wrote this in the diary and left it there to be found. Once we get to the diary pages, I think you'll kind of see that. Maybe the grandmother did. I don't know that the grandmother would have tried to do something like that. From what I understand of her, she's an okay lady. I have nothing against her. If she believed what Lily was saying, then she had every right to feel the way she felt or feels or whatever. All I know is she was wrong in what she thought about me. But once we get to the diary pages, I'm sure you'll kind of see why I feel like she wrote that last paragraph to be found. But again, so Detective Langley sits down, watches this DVD interview, and then this is what she gets out of it. On Monday, November 2nd, forensic interview was conducted on Lily at GSAT by Kelly Burks. This detective was not present for the interview. A DVD with a recording was provided to this detective by Kelly Burks. During the interview, Lillian advised the following. She's currently 13 years of age. And again, during this interview, it's not like she's sitting here saying, hey, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. They're saying, and then did this happen? Or what happened after that? Did he do this? Did he do that? There's a lot of did he do? There was a lot of that in this interview when you watch the DVD. But she's currently 13 years of age. Her date of birth is, I think we've already put her date of birth out there. That doesn't really matter. She's in the 8th grade. She knows she is here today to talk about her being raped. She was living in Morrow with her mother. They lived with her mother's boyfriend, Randy. Randy's brother doesn't remember the name, which was Jared. Randy's niece, Kayla, and her husband, Shane. We weren't married. And their kids, which maybe just the interviewer or Langley got this wrong, but it was just one kid, my daughter. Her mother never came out of the room to talk to her much, so she would always be in the living room with Kayla and the baby. One night she was going to her room. She thinks they, Shane and Kayla, had been smoking. Again, we smoked outside, so she's saying that we had been smoking and we're coming in essentially. And he came in the room and she got hit in the back of her head towards the top, passed out for a second. And when she came to, Shane was on top of her. She passed out for a second. Now, I don't know who said a second, but she says, again, you'll see it here in a second, that from the time that she gets knocked out to the time that she wakes up, her clothes are off, and I'm already raping her, right? So it's more than a second if she was supposedly knocked out. But again, that's just another inconsistency. She didn't know what to do. He was raping her. His penis was inside her. His penis was in her vagina. This happened in her bedroom on the bed. She was lying on her back. He was facing her. Her pants and underwear were off. She does not remember how her pants and underwear came off. His clothes were on. He had on, which is weird to me that she would say that. I mean, I guess she does say that I pulled my pants down, but he had on his work pants and a t-shirt. His pants were pulled down. Just his penis went inside her vagina. His penis did not go anywhere else. He did not use a condom. It hurt a lot, which she only rated it a 6 on a scale of 1 to 10. If you go back and look at that, right? But again, and this is the same day. So the same day she's saying it hurt a lot, less than an hour later, she tells Kathy Carter is maybe a 6. You know, which maybe that is a lot to some people. I don't know. But again, just another inconsistency. When he was done, he said, quote, "If you tell anybody, I'm going to hurt you, but I don't know how." Again, I don't know how that sounds believable. She didn't say anything to him. She didn't pay attention to see if anything was coming out of her. She didn't pay attention to see if anything was coming out of her. So she's doing this forensic interview. Now, remember, we've already seen Kathy Carter where she said that she told her she noticed slight bleeding afterwards. She didn't pay attention to see if anything was coming out of her. Just another inconsistency, just another lie, right? It burned when she used the bathroom. It was the summer when she was supposed to start 7th grade, but she didn't start school at that time because her mother was on drugs, also didn't have her in school. It was 2014. It happened one time. There was never another time when he did anything else. He had never said anything to her prior that was inappropriate. He came in her bedroom alone. This is where she says, Kayla and the baby were in their room. If you're knocked out, how do you know where they're at? You said me and Kayla had just been smoking, and then I came in there and did this. Randy's brother was in his room all the time. Her mom and Randy were in their room. Again, that puts those 3 people, Randy and Aaron, maybe 15 feet, Jared, maybe 10 feet, and Kayla, like maybe 20, 25 feet away from where she says this take place. The first person she told was her friend Joyce. Again, we've talked about Joyce. Joyce, she told her this year in 8th grade. She also told 3 other friends, Maddie, Taylor, and Andrea. At the same time, she told Joyce. Again, let's remember, Joyce, Maddie, Taylor, and Andrea, it took them a while to find them because they only had their first names for whatever reason. But when they did find them, they were, by the ADA's own words, uncooperative. Never anything ever mentioned about them other than this again. And then, at that status hearing where he said they were uncooperative. Nothing like this has ever happened to her before. Her mother and grandmother both know. She went to a mental behavior hospital, and her grandmother, see, here's another inconsistency. Here's the proof of the inconsistency that I pointed out to you already. She went to a mental behavior hospital, and her grandmother had asked around to her friends if anything had happened, and she found out through her friends. Again, this is more than a month after she's come out of the mental hospital. She's back living with Shirley. They've been talking about this for over a month, and she can't get her story straight still. Remember what Shirley said. Shirley said she found out by finding the diary, right? Here, she's saying, again, more than a month. They've talked about this. I'm sure that maybe they haven't. Maybe Shirley's like, I don't want to bother her with this. Let's not bring it up. Let's just wait to the interview. I don't know how it all went down, but just this is a huge inconsistency, right? She went to a behavior hospital. Her grandmother asked around to her friends if anything had happened, and she found out about the rape through her friends. When she got out of the hospital, her mother found out. Her grandmother had told her. She was in the hospital for 2 weeks and then went to aftercare for about 3 weeks. She felt used, dirty, and worthless and felt like her mother didn't care. Again, another point to her mom, right? Thank you, grandma. She had daughter problems. You're right. Another point to the mother. She felt used, dirty, worthless. If this really happened to you, yes, those are probably your feelings. And then her next thought is, and my mother didn't care. I think she feels used, dirty, and worthless because of the way her mother and father, mostly her mother, because I don't think she cared about her father as much as she did her mother, to be honest with you, from conversations I remember her having with Kayla or Kayla telling me about. Why would you say your mother didn't care? Your mother apparently didn't know about this, right? Why would she care? She didn't know until you come out of the hospital. Kelly takes a break, steps out of the room. Lillian begins to cry when she's alone. Kelly returns to the room. Again, when she cried, she grabbed a tissue. She sniffled for a second. It's not like she broke down. She literally wiped a couple tears, and that's the only tears that may have, because you couldn't even really see her. It was almost like World War II footage, the interview, right? It was far away, the camera was. You saw both of them, but all you really see is she grabbed a tissue, wiped her eyes, and that was it. Um, so Kelly Burks comes back in and asks her some more questions. Shane's legs were touching hers because he was against her, which I just don't know what that makes sense. His mouth did not touch her. She did not touch any of his body parts. He came. That's how it stopped. He came inside her, which is fucking bold, right? You're raping a young girl. You come inside her with no condom on. Like, if you're really going to do this, that's a bold fucking move. Again, I know this is very sensitive content, and I know sometimes some things I'm saying might sound insensitive, but I know for a fact that this is all bullshit. So take it how you want. But if you're actually doing this, and you're a piece of shit, right? We can all agree on that. But if you're actually doing this, you don't wear a condom and you come inside of the person, you are a bold fucking monster. I'll give you that. She believes he hit her on the head with his hand. When I first got to Clayton County, Kayla was saying, and this is before any paperwork was really drawn up other than like the warrants and, the stuff they already had before they arrested me. Kayla had heard from somebody that it was a baseball bat, that she said that I used a baseball bat. So somebody had been saying that she said I used a baseball bat. Here, she says I hit her on, she believes I hit her in the head with my hand, but she wasn't sure. At my trial, she says it was either my hand or maybe the lamp. She mentions a lamp. I don't even remember a lamp being in her room, but she does. And that was another thing that my lawyer brought up during trial to the forensic interviewer was, why are all these details coming out now? Like, where were these details? And she was like, well, sometimes we don't remember details the correct way. So this isn't remembering details differently. These are new details. Like, a lamp has never been mentioned before she got on the stand. Another reason why I feel like she sandbagged the prosecution a little bit to help me out, to be honest with you, because if you get the trial transcript, let's say one of you actually wants to deep dive into this farther than what we've gone, and you get the trial transcript, you would probably agree with me that she was uncooperative with the prosecution when she testified, and that she was not very uncooperative. She was more cooperative with my attorney. But that's the way I viewed it, I guess. There was a knot on her head the following day in the morning, apparently from me hitting her with my hand. She believed it happened around midnight. She believes it was June or July. Again, she's not sure. It's only like a year later, or a year and a couple months after it's supposed to have happened, and she can't remember what month it was in. She can't think of anything else that hasn't been told. Everything they've talked about today has been the truth. Bullshit. This is just saying Kelly Burks was a forensic interviewer. Lillian's name. So again, this is the same day of the interview and the medical exam. November 2nd, Detective Langley and Detective Brown met with Shirley at the GSAC. We spoke with Shirley about the circumstances surrounding Lillian's case. Shirley provided me with a written statement stating that Lillian had been seeing a psychologist for the past 8 months, again, to deal with anger issues with her mother. Not seeing a psychologist for sexual abuse or anything like that. And sometimes, right, they have an outcry. Maybe that's the case. That happens in some cases. I'll agree with that. That's not what this was. So she's seeing a psychologist for eight plus months to deal with anger issues with her mother. She's been cutting herself and was depressed. She was committed to Lakeview, and as Shirley was getting some clothes out of Lillian's dresser, she came across a notebook which had recently been given to Lillian by a friend. Lillian was using the notebook as a diary and had a few entries in the diary. Lillian wrote that she had been raped. Shirley spoke to Lillian and told her she knew what had happened and advised her it was important to tell her what happened. Lillian told her it was Shane, a man who lived in the same residence as Lillian and her mother at one time. Lillian told Shirley that she had been hit in the head. Again, it took her at least a day or two before she said Shane did it. Like, they didn't come to her with a diary and say, what happened? And she said, Shane did it. It took a while for them to get a name out of her. Shirley provided me with a notebook which contained the writings, and the notebook dated 8/26, which I'm guessing would have been 2015, maybe a month before she was admitted to the hospital when she wrote the third page of the entry for that day. It reads, "And because this is my journal and no one else is to read, I've smoked weed, had sex, liked a guy that didn't like me, done meth," that's supposed to say once, done meth once, And she puts in parentheses, wow. Smoked cigarettes so many times. I've smoked, had packs. I've gotten drunk, vaped, smoked a hookah, tried to kill myself more than twice, and have been raped. But this is none of your business. Again, and when we get to again, I know we're 3 hours into this, and those of you that have stuck through there, I appreciate you guys. I know this is a lot of information, a lot of stuff I'm throwing at you. Um, I appreciate you riding through this live with me and keeping me company while I go through this. Uh, but this is none of your business. Again, this is the last little paragraph that's separate from the deep, dark, depressing stuff about her mother, which you'll see in just a second. I wish I would have stopped this at an hour ago and maybe done a part 2, but we're already almost to the end, so let's do it. A copy of the page written about the rape and written statement has been added to the case file and notebooks placed in the evidence. So this is, I'm just going to let you stop and read it if you want to. This is Shirley's statement saying the exact same thing that we just said, that Elizabeth seeing a psychologist. She took her to the hospital. Here's where September 30th. Here's where Shirley says September 30th. If you go back a couple pages, Langley says it was September 23rd. In her summary, Shirley says it was September 23rd. Here, she says she took her to the Duluth Gwinnett Hospital on Wednesday evening, September 30th. In turn, she was taken to the Lakeview Hospital. Again, another inconsistency, another bad job by the police. They can't even get the dates right. So this just says what she just said about the grandmother saying, hey, I found the diary. I know what happened. And that it was important that she tell me who it was. She told me it was Shane, a man that lived in the house, and many others. She said it happened before she came back to live with me. She stated he had hit her in the head. She also said her mom was there, but in another room. I provided the diary. Not only she say your mom was there, she said everybody was there, actually. I provided the diary to Detective Langley. Same day of the interview and the exam, Langley visited GSAC in Duluth. The purpose was conducting the photo lineup. So on the same day of the exam, the interview, she brings Stacy Brown. Now, Stacy Brown is the only detective that took the stand in my case because he's the one that administered the lineup. And that's all he got up there and testified to, right? And what he did testify to was, one, that she picked me out. Two, that he had no idea of any of the facts of this case when he administered this lineup because he wasn't supposed to. That's why they get a outside detective that's not dealing with the case, because they really don't want the detective to know who the alleged perpetrator really is on the paper either, right? The one that's administering to her. So I introduced myself to Limit and this detective. Okay, so this is from Detective Stacy that wrote this, not Jennifer Langley. Again, he's the one that administered the photo lineup. It's the only thing he had to do with my case. He never researched my case, or maybe he did afterwards. I don't know. But before, he didn't even know who I was, which picture I was, whatever. And he testified to that. And again, the only detective to take the stand was this guy who knew nothing about the case. Langley never took the stand. Deese never took the stand. Nobody else did. No other cops. No arresting officers, nothing. I, Detective Stacy Brown, and Jennifer Langley visited GSAC. The purpose of the visit was assisting Detective Langley, again, because he's supposed to have no knowledge of what's going on in her investigation, by conducting a photo lineup. I introduced myself to Lillian and informed her that I would be administering the photo lineup. I read the document to her and made sure that she understood the process. She stated she understood and began to examine the 6 photos on the sheet of paper. She identified the 5th picture. I asked her to circle the picture and write her initials and the date and time near the picture. I initialed the picture as well and placed the date and time near the picture. She signed the document, placed the X in the appropriate identifying square, identifying the suspect. So this is just that box where she said picture 5, his signature, her signature, dates, all that. You'll be shown a group of photographs. You can pause and read. Again, this photo lineup wasn't a bad job. Yeah, she picked me out because she knew me. But I will give them this. This guy almost looks identical except for this extra, which I did have. And I still do have right now. I got a little bit of a double chin, right? So this guy's got just a little bit bigger double chin, but could be my fucking twin brother for all I know. Like, I'll give them credit for this photo lineup. These guys look like me. That's just another one. With the actual names of everybody, right? On Friday, November 6th, 2015, Detective Langley placed a DVD into evidence. So this is just the evidence saying, hey, this DVD is in there. On Friday, November 6th, placed a notebook from Shirley into evidence. So this is just the day, November 6th, 4 days after the interview and all this photo lineup and exam is done. She's placing all this stuff into evidence. Another just evidence booking sheet. On Friday, November 6th, the same day she's placing this stuff into evidence, I attempted to make contact with Stephen Shankiros at a number that I didn't have anymore. There was no answer. I left a message requesting a return phone call. I blocked that number because I just didn't want it being out there in case somebody does have it. But it was a number that I didn't have. Like, again, this is more than a year after I'd moved back home from Clayton County. So we're talking about a year and months. So this is November 6th. This is supposed to have happened June or July of 2014. This is a year and 4 or 5 months, 6 months, whatever it is. On Wednesday, November 11th, so 5 days later, I received a package in the mail from GSAT. The package contained the forensic synopsis completed by Kelly Burtz. It also contained the medical assessment forms for Lillian. The medical records state the exam were normal and consistent with the history given. We've gone over all this. The forms and synopsis all put in the case file. This is the child interview report. So this is Kelly Burtz. This is her narrative of that same interview, right? This is just her narrative that she wrote afterwards. If you want to pause, we've already gone through this twice already, essentially. You can pause and read it all you want to. It's the last part. I'll go back. I'll give you a second to pause. Second. Give you another second to pause. Let's take a sip of my tea. You can read all this if you want to. Again, we've been over this in my notes. We've been over this in Detective Langley's notes. We've been over this now with this narrative. And then she even has her handwritten narrative, like from when she was writing in the interview, like a little quick shorthand, I guess you would call it. The notes she was writing down as she was interviewing Lillian. Those will be in there too. Again, you can pause and read all that. This is just the interview form saying, who she was, identifying information, who she was interviewed by, where, when, and all this checked out because it didn't matter. These are her little handwritten notes. So at 10:25 a.m. is when they began the interview. You can pause and read all these. I mean, essentially we've gone over all this. They all say the same exact thing. It's the Joyce in 8th grade and all the other friends, Maggie Taylor, out of hospital, felt used, dirty, worthless, put together with mom not caring. Mom never talked to me. She was always in the living room. She said that, right? Living with mom and Morrow. So I am going through this, but it's just like, it hurt a lot. If you tell anybody, I'm going to hurt you, but I don't know how. Again, just doesn't make sense. You can pause and read if you go over that. This is the last bit of her notes. Legs were against me, no mouth, didn't touch his body parts. He came inside me, believe he hit me with hand, that there was a knot next morning, whatever. So that's just the end of the Kelly Burt's little notes of her sit down interview with Lily. Medical assessment services. You can pause and read all this. It's just more, pertinent information about her. Again, mom's ex-boyfriend, niece's C-type narrative. I believe some of this is like duplicative stuff that somehow got in there. I don't know. But you can, again, pause and read. This is, again, the release for information. We've seen this. We've seen this. Brent, Aaron, Shirley. I believe there is a few things that we haven't seen, like the diary. So we've already seen this. Yeah, there's some duplicate stuff in here. I think that happened when I had it turned into a PDF. I'm not sure. Again, we already went through this. You can pause and read. This is the hymen. This is the evidence of innocence. Again, a duplicate. Again, a duplicate. Again, a duplicate. We've already gone through all this duplicate stuff. Okay, here's where we get out of the duplicate stuff. On Friday, December 11th, 2015, I, Detective Langley, and Detective Simmons went to the Steel Mart located at wherever Steel Mart is. You can look it up if you want to. I worked there quite a while before all this in an effort to make contact with Shane Quiros. I don't even know how they know I worked there, to be honest with you, because we made contact with Mark, who advised Quiros had not worked for their company for approximately 3 years. Like I said, excuse me, it's burping. For approximately 3 years. He stated Quiros now works for a family-owned business in plumbing somewhere in Jackson County. It's actually Banks County, where I worked when I was arrested. At 11:17 on the same day, we relocated to my mom's address. This is the address on Quiros's Georgia driver's license. I made contact with Ray Rice. He's deceased now. I'll give you his last name. Who advised Quiros was his grandson, but he does not speak to him due to a family altercation. I'm not going to get into all that. It was just something that happened between me and my mom. We stopped talking for a while. And due to that, I didn't really talk to my grandfather a lot before that. My grandfather wasn't the nicest guy. He wasn't the most loving to my mom or me or any of his family members. He was a tough nail, right? So, but I left a business card with Rice and requested Quiros call me if he made contact with him. So that was December 11th. On December 12th, the very next day at 9:18 in the morning, I, Detective Langley, received a voicemail from Stephen Shane Quiros returning my call. Quiros advised he could be reached at and then gave her my current number. Okay, let's look at this because I believe it was actually days later before she even tried to call me back, if I remember right. On Monday, December 14th, 2 days, at approximately 10:55 in the morning, I placed a phone call to Shane. There was no answer, and I left a message for him to return the call. So she waited 2 days. I called her the next day after she comes to my mother's house. I call. As soon as I get the information they're looking for me, I call. I have nothing to hide, right? She waits 2 days to call me back, right? So how important is this? On Tuesday, December 15th, we're about to get to my favorite part of this evidence packet where I cuss her out. But on Tuesday, December 15th, 2015, at approximately 17:32, I received a voicemail again the very next day. She called me back on the 14th, 2 days after I called her on the 12th. She calls me back on the 14th. And for whatever reason, 10:55, I was probably working when we were doing like plumbing jobs. I didn't keep my phone in my pocket. I left it in the truck when we were like in Applebee's changing a water heater or whatever we were doing. I didn't keep my phone on me because I wasn't going to be able to answer it. Typically, I had gloves on or my hands would be dirty. I wasn't going to answer my phone until we were taking a break or whatever. So I wasn't. It's not like I was dodging her, right? Because I'm returning her calls. The very next day, December 15th, I, Detective Langley, received a voicemail from Stephen Shane Quiros. He requested I return his call. She can't say that he wasn't answering my calls when she wasn't answering my calls. I'm calling her back the very next day after she's calling me, right? She returns my call. If for the 2 times, the first time, right, she had the wrong number. When I finally found out about it, I call her. She waits 2 days, calls me back, doesn't get me for whatever reason. I don't know. I called her back the very next day. And here it is. She received a voicemail. Why couldn't she pick up, right? Maybe she was busy. True. I was busy, obviously. So it's possible. On Wednesday, December 16th, the next day, she made contact with me. I advised Quiros I needed to schedule an appointment to speak with him in reference to an incident which occurred in our jurisdiction in the summer of 2014. Quiros continuously asked for more information and was advised he would not be provided additional information. Quiros was hesitant about scheduling an interview with this detective, stating he had not committed any crimes when he lived here, further stating all he did was work and take care of his family. I advised Quiros I would give him until December 30th, 2015 to schedule an interview, and if I had not heard from him, I would proceed with the case as necessary. Again, this is the conversation where I asked her, is this about a tag? Did you get my name because of a license plate? Because I had a license plate stolen? She says, no, I'm not telling you anything. I need you to come down here. They haven't even told me like this is sexual assault, rape, or anything like that, right? So that was December 16th. On January 8th, which is a good while later, almost a month, she received a phone call from me. She never called me back. I wasn't pushing this. I have no idea what it's about, right? Essentially, I know I didn't break any laws other than using marijuana, right? Maybe speeding, whatever. Those were the only laws that I broke. So I wasn't sweating shit. Nobody's told me about a sexual assault or anything like that. On Friday, January 8th, at approximately 14:25, I received a phone call from Shane Quiros. He repeatedly asked if he could be interviewed over the phone. I advised him he could not. He became irate with me and began to cuss. Now, here's the thing. By this time, I know that it's a sexual assault. On this date, I do, because there's another phone call between that last phone call. Let's go back up. On December 16th, we had this call. She tells me I was at Home Depot. So sometime I couldn't tell you what date. I think that I had the date in my notes. I don't know. But between December 16th and January 8th, we had another talk. So this phone call, I remember where I was. I was in Home Depot with my boss. We were buying some parts for whatever we were doing that day. And I'm talking to her. That's when I asked her about the plate. This phone call is when I cussed her out. I already knew that it was a sexual assault. So where's the phone call about her telling me? Because she finally told me when we had that phone call, the one that's missing from her summaries, I was at home. Me and Kayla were standing outside smoking a cigarette where we lived at. And I'm talking to her and I'm like, look, and again, I'm asking her even then. That's when I first started asking about being interviewed over the phone. I'm like, or tell me what it is. I'm not coming down there unless you tell me what it is. There's no reason for me to. You're going to tell me. And I even told her, like, you can tell me what this is. You've lied to me. I think I tell her here that you lied to me. But I told her then, I was like, she says, I can't tell you what it is. And then she finally tells me in the summary that's missing, the where she says, Kiro stated, I know what this is about. It's about a 12-year-old living in our house. Where's that fucking summary, right? She has all these other summaries, but you won't see that one in here. That's the one where she told me that it was a sexual assault. She didn't tell me who was accusing me, but that is where I said, listen, if this is about a young girl who lived in our house that was being neglected by her mother, it's bullshit. And the reason I'd already come to that conclusion very quickly on that phone call was because we just found out Lily had apparently been in the mental hospital when Kayla's calling her grandmother saying, why do you think Clayton County is coming to look for Shane? Have they been there? But again, this is my favorite page because if you know me, if you've watched any of my videos, you understand how I can get a little upset. This was probably my first real anger at law enforcement. As we've seen with the Emerson and Odd video, it wasn't the last, but I'm working on that. On Friday, January 8th, 2016. So this is the last, second to last conversation I believe we had. I received a phone call from Shane. He repeatedly asked if he could be interviewed over the phone, and I advised him he could not. Quiros became irate with me and began to cuss. I ended the phone call. At 14:31, Quiros called back and left a message on my voicemail. In his message, he initially apologized for cussing at me and stated that was just the way he talks, especially when he is heated. I said that. Quiros stated he wanted me to take a warrant out for him so he could push everything to file a lawsuit for false arrest. I said that. Again, by this time, I know it was a sexual assault. We're missing a summary. I don't know why she didn't put it in there. It's never been in there. I didn't take it out. My lawyer didn't take it out. There's never been the summary from the phone call where she says that I said I know who it is after she told me it's a sexual assault. Where is that summary, right? That's always plagued me. I don't know if she didn't put it in there because she wasn't supposed to tell me it was a sexual assault until I come down there from an interview, whatever. But it's not here. Quiros stated he wanted me to take a warrant out for him so he could push everything to file a false arrest. Quiros advised I had no idea what I was talking about with false arrest at the time, right? I know I had done some research after she told me it was a sexual assault about like what my rights were and things like that. He stated he wasn't going to miss out on this. Is when I asked her, can we do this on a Saturday or a Sunday? Like if we can schedule this for Saturday. That's why I got irate and cussed her out. Because I said, listen, I missed that interview, right? The water heater goes out. We had a scheduled interview. The water heater goes out. I'm calling her on this date to tell her, hey, maybe I got it backwards. I just know that this is the conversation. I remember where I was. I was riding home in my plumbing truck back to where we lived. When I cussed her out, I pulled into the driveway. I finished the conversation, like leaving the voicemail, getting out of the truck. Like that's how much I remember about this conversation. He stated he wasn't going to miss out on a fucking day's pay to come down there and tell you I am fucking innocent. He said he could break down any story that I had about him in 10 seconds over the phone. Shane gave me the options of a phone interview, takeout warrants, or a district attorney review, further stating the DA would most likely do a fucking phone interview. Quiros proceeded to say that I've lied to him about the case, telling him I couldn't tell him what he was being accused of, which she did end up telling me that. But we don't have that summary, right? Also, that I advised him I had enough evidence to take a warrant out on him already. Quote, when I know that is bullshit because there is no motherfucking evidence of anything I could have done, unquote. And I did say that because I didn't do anything. There wouldn't be any evidence. So yeah, I said all this. T-Rose requested I call him back, quote, so we could have a civil fucking conversation, and then advised, quote, have a wonderful fucking weekend. Yes, I said every bit of that. And the reason I began to cuss her out was because I asked her, listen, can we set this up for a Saturday or Sunday? And that's when she told me I don't work weekends. I said, this must not be that fucking important then, right? And that's when, you know, I began to just lose it. She cussed, or I started to cuss. She ended the phone call, hung up on me. I called her back and left her that. Started out trying to like, look, I'm sorry, but by the end of it, have a wonderful fucking weekend. Absolutely. All of this happened. All of this took place. But what she is missing is that summary where she told me, okay, I'll tell you what you're being accused of. It's a sexual assault. I won't tell you who's accusing you. And that's when I said, listen, if this is about this person, it's bullshit. Again, if you're just joining for whatever reason, you can go back and see all that. We broke all this down, right? We're just getting to their parts. On Tuesday, January 11th, 2016, at approximately 8:30, I received a voice message from Shane Tiro stating he would like to schedule an interview for January 14th. This is 3 days later. I'm trying to say, this is where we set up the service call for Jonesboro. So I talked to my boss. My boss is like, look, we got to do some work down there anyway. Let's try to set this up. On Tuesday, January 11th, she didn't even answer the phone, right? I'm calling her. She didn't answer the phone. How important was this case to her? He would like to schedule an interview for January 14th between 9 and 10. He stated he would be in Jonesboro for a service call and would come by to be interviewed. On Wednesday, the next day, I contacted Kiros and advised him he could be interviewed January 14th. I advised Kiros I would not be in the office and he would be interviewed by Detective Deese. And most likely she was passing me off to Deese at this point because I cussed her out. I don't know. That's what I would figure because most likely, you know, like there's nothing more important than this case going on in her life as far as her work life, most likely right now, right? This is a pretty big case, a rape case in her eyes. I believe she was passing me off to Deese here because I lost it on her, and maybe she felt compromised. The case would be compromised, or maybe I was going to lose on her again. She wanted to have a fresh set of eyes on it, and maybe that was a good option for her, right? And provided him with a phone contact number. Now we know that I wrote this again. I wasn't dodging them. I'm the one calling them, asking them this. So I'm not setting this up just to fuck with them, right? So we set it up for January 14th. On January 14th at 8:19 in the morning, Shane Quiros called Detective Deese and advised him he would have to cancel his appointment for an interview. Quiros advised him he had a busted water heater issue and his appointment in Jonesboro would take longer than expected. Quiros was advised to contact either myself or Deese back to reschedule. That's not what I told him. It was the water heater issue on Memorial Drive. We weren't even going to Jonesboro. Had we gone to Jonesboro that day, I would have gone to that fucking the jail. The police department is in Jonesboro. I would have gone to that. We weren't even in Jonesboro. It's not like we were there in Jonesboro. It was just taking longer. If that were the case, I would have went after. I would have said, hey, it's going to be, instead of 9 or 10, it's going to be 11, 12, 1, 2, whatever. We were completely on the other side of Atlanta, Memorial Drive. Look it up on the map. He would call back to reschedule. On Tuesday, I utilized this is February 2nd. So I didn't call back. I'll tell you straight up. I said, fuck it. If they're going to arrest me, they're going to arrest me. I already didn't trust her. She already lied and said, I can't tell you what it is. Then she told me what it was, and she wouldn't tell me who it was. And she wouldn't come in on the weekend. Like, I don't work weekends. I'm offering your guy that you're looking at for a rape case to say, hey, I'll come down there on Saturday or Sunday because I'm not going to miss a day's pay, right? I'm willing to come down there on Saturday or Sunday. I think you fucking trek into work. If this was a bit of a deal. Instead, she decided to work weekends, and that's when I fucking lost. So January 14th was our last conversation. That I'm going to be there. We're on Memorial Drive, even though they got that wrong. They thought we were in Jonesboro. On February 2nd, she took out. She applied for the arrest warrants through Judge West. There's probable cause, and he issued the following arrest warrants. So there's all that. This is the diary. So 8/26. I don't believe that was the day that the last part was written. So this is the very first page in the diary. Um, I didn't have all this. The only page that I had in my packet in jail was the last page with the last paragraph and the paragraph above it. But I didn't have these pages until actually after my trial was over. So I had no idea that she wrote all this stuff about her mom, essentially, right? But I'm good for a while. I'll talk more and laugh more. I'll be able to sleep normally and eat. But then something happens, like a switch turns off somewhere, and I'm left in the dark. The darker my mind, the darker my eyes, the darker my lies. The darker my lies makes a lot of sense. But each time I feel like I'm falling deeper. Each time I feel like I'm falling deeper and deeper, and it scares me. I'm terrified one day I won't be able to surface in the water, but it's just like I'm crying for help. I agree. Yet I don't want it when they vaguely offer. I'm just confused what to do with myself. When they're all stressing, I'm dying. I want to die. I agree. This young lady at this time that's writing this is in a very bad place mentally. I don't know why. I assume at this point in my life, 6 years removed from the trial, I assume it was the issue she had with her mother. You'll see the next page. I believe it's like kind of where you can realize she's talking about her mother. But I will agree that whoever's writing this has issues. That's why I prayed for her. Probably a few months in to being in jail, I forgave her in my heart and my mind, right? I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to hold a grudge. I forgave and I prayed for her almost every night. Every night I prayed. Every night I remembered before I went to sleep in my cell bunk to pray. I prayed for her. And I hadn't even read this, right? I just knew that whatever was going on to make her make these accusations, there was something wrong with her. I knew that. Very at place and needing help, but not knowing how to get it. I completely agree. So let's get to the next page. I keep so much pain inside myself. I try to keep the angry, but it's been long enough for you to get it together. Again, talking to her mom, right? Long enough for you to get it together to try and get us together, trying to get her mom back in her life. But you can't. I try so hard to fight it, but I can't. It has all changed me into something that I've grown to truly know, but who I want to be, and how, and I'm not even sure what all that means, and how I want to feel feels so distant as if it's in another galaxy and I can't even see it anymore. It's me who's my own enemy. I beat me up. I strip my confidence, my own respect. I create the monsters. I am the monster. Um, I, even though I know for a fact, no matter what, right? No matter what any of you guys that ever watched this thing, I know for a fact that she lied. I won't call her a monster. I'll call her disturbed. I'll call her misguided. I'll call her uh, just in pain. At this time in her life, she had a lot of pain. I don't believe. Look, we have proof that she wasn't raped. We don't have proof that she wasn't sexually abused because you know abuse isn't necessarily rape. You can grope a child. You can do this. You can do that. Whatever. Um, so maybe there's a possibility that something like that did happen. It wasn't me that did it. If it did, I can assure you of that. Um, but I will say that this line down here at the bottom, the second to last sentence, I create the monsters. I believe that's pretty telling. Let's get to the last page, right? Sometimes, which this is a continuing, uh, all the way to here is basically kind of continuing, and this is the last part. Sometimes I just need to be alone. This is the only page I had in jail. This is the only page I ever saw, even at trial. They didn't even show the other pages. I just got those after I got out and got my discovery pack from my lawyer that went to trial with me. I was like, where these other pages came from? I'd never seen these before. Um, like I create the monsters. Like that'd have been something I'd have pointed out in my little like handwritten shit for jail, right? But I didn't have that. Sometimes I just need to be alone so I can cry and talk without being judged and interrupted. I cry too much about everything, but it's as if I can't stop crying, but makes me feel weak. But it also makes me feel a way I can't describe. Lost power. I'm back. Hey, good to have you back. I'm glad. I appreciate you guys for sticking around. L3, at DG, you've been here from jump to. This means a lot just to have a little bit of company. There's a few people in here, some that aren't talking, and I'm sure there's a couple trolls that are, fucking screen recording this whole thing. Do whatever you want with it. I don't give a fuck, right? You can fucking cover this. You can take your troll channel and get you a couple thousand views and skew this and cut this up however you want to. I don't care. Praying for her. Yeah, bro, she's in her 20s at this point. I won't say that I continuously pray for her. There are some times that I think about her. I wonder how she feels about this whole situation. Like knowing that me and her know the truth, right? I wonder how she feels about the situation sometimes. She doesn't cross my mind very, very often. Before the odd video, I probably hadn't thought about her in a year or two. I don't know. It's been a while. Before Odd called me a child molester, and now here we are with this. And where's Odd? Fucking unemployed. In case you see this. Anyways, cry too much makes me weak. Feel the way to describe. Okay, so all that we've read up until this point has been like poetic and deep and dark, and this just the tone changes, right? For me, it does anyway. And because this is my journal and no one else is to read, I've smoked weed, had sex, liked the guy that didn't like me, done meth once, wow, smoked cigarettes so many times. I've smoked, had packs, I've gotten drunk, vaped, smoked the hookah, tried to kill myself more than twice, and have been. And then she started to mark this out. Like, notice that she started to mark, and she wrote and have been raped, and she marked that out, right? But then she rewrote it. Why did you mark it out and rewrite it? It was written perfectly. This is just another thing that I remember thinking in jail. Like it's almost like she was fighting in herself. I appreciate that, DG1. It's almost like she was fighting herself. She even marked out raped, wrote it perfectly, and then rewrote it the same way. I believe fully. I remember thinking this when I first read this. This is taking me back because again, I haven't looked at this in a long while. I believe that she left this defined, and maybe this last part and have been raped. She almost didn't put in. She almost took it out. Right? She almost decided not to say that. But this is none of your business. Take that how you wish. That's just my, that's the way I remember seeing it. Like, and you can clearly see and is written fine, and then she just rewrote it. Raped, clearly see raped is written fine, marked out, rewrote. Just strange, right? Draw whatever conclusion you want. Incident report. Now, this is a different situation. I had no idea about this. This is the last part. I promise you, we're 3.5 hours into this. We're maybe a couple pages away from the end. So that's the end of my discovery pack. That diary pack, that we just read is the end of my discovery pack, other than these parts, which I didn't have while I was in jail. I didn't even know. Kayla didn't even tell me about this, even though it happened a few times. It happened days after I was arrested. Some phone calls were made to Lily and her mother. I had no idea about this. Maybe Caleb mentioned it to me. I don't remember this because I would have been telling them, why the fuck are they trying to reach out to her? I never asked anybody. I never asked Kayla, reach out to her, tell her to tell the truth. I just said, look, we all know that it's bullshit, right? Everybody that lived in that house, even her mother, has to know right now and has probably always felt that there's no way that I raped her in that house with everybody in there. But Kayla's dad and Kayla's uncle, Jared and Randy, you'll remember them, those of you that have been here from the beginning. Jared and Randy, it started with Jared, Kayla's dad, who at this time was calling me his son-in-law, even though I haven't talked to him in over a year. Like me and Kayla, we when we left Clayton County, we left him in that house by himself. We had all decided, me, Kayla, and Jared, to kick Randy and Aaron out after Lily was removed because they had stopped taking, they were just fucked up on the pills and they had stopped paying bills. So we kicked them out. They went to Florida on a meth binge. Me and Kayla stayed there. Me, Kayla, and my daughter stayed there for another, I don't know, maybe month or two. And we couldn't take Jared no more because the pill thing was the same situation. Look, I lived down there for a year total, right? Um, but Jared probably peeled up out of his mind. I was arrested February 3rd or 4th. I was booked into Clayton County on February 6th, but I was arrested in Gordon County like February 4th, 3rd, I think. Um, they had to transfer me. So on February 11th, so what is that? Like fucking 8 days after I get arrested, um, Shirley calls the Duluth Police Department. She actually called Detective Langley first and says, "Listen, she's getting threatening phone calls." I don't think this is funny. The reason I kind of smile, I kind of just jest at this is because it's just Jared, right? Jared, if y'all don't know Jared, obviously, I can see him being peeled up out of his mind, and look, to an extent, I appreciate him trying to go to bat for me here in his own way, but never would I have ever condoned anybody reaching out to Shirley, Aaron, or Lily. I didn't ask anybody to do that while I was in jail. I would never have condoned that, and I'm pretty sure that's why Kayla didn't tell me, because thinking back, I don't ever remember having this conversation, and really the only time, like I said, I've only looked through this discovery pack that we're looking at. So this is the one that my lawyer had, my trial lawyer, that was kind of passed around between all my lawyers, ended up with my trial lawyer. He gave it to my mom after the trial, um, and gave it to me or whatever. My mom gave it to me. So I'd never seen this. This was not in my trial packet, even though this all happened months before I got my trial packet. This was not in my discovery pack that my paid lawyer turned over to me. So my paid lawyer, I took him off my case in November, December 2016, something like that, maybe January 2017. He gave me what he had. He should have had this because this is February 11th, 2016. This is 8 days after I got arrested. So Shirley calls Detective Langley about Jared harassing Lily, actually. And Langley tells Shirley, listen, you got to call Duluth where you live, file the report through them. Let's read this. Even though it has nothing to do with my case, essentially, it was never brought up at trial. They say something about they want to use this to try to keep me from getting bond. This is before I had my bond hearing, before I had my evidence hearing, all that. Pilled up fucking Jared, which, like I said, had anybody told me this was happening, I would have lost my shit on Kayla. I would have told Kayla, you tell these stupid motherfuckers, because eventually it kept happening for like a month. And eventually Randy got involved too. Aaron and Randy had broken up. Randy got left in Florida when Aaron took his truck, came back home after Lily went to the mental hospital. Had anybody told me this was happening, I would have said, you stupid motherfuckers, knock it off. Like, what are you trying to do? They're going to think I'm sending y'all, even though there's no conversations. If there were any phone conversations of me saying, hey, tell Jared or tell Randy to call Lily and say these things to her, they would have used that against me in my trial, right? Because that's 100% illegal. It's intimidation of a witness. They would have charged me with that. They would have added charges to me, but I never said any of that. Again, I had no idea any of this went on until whenever I read this. I can't even tell you when the first time I went through this discovery pack. Because again, the only other discovery pack I had was the one I had in jail, and this wasn't in it. On February 11th, 2016, 1906, Officer Samuel was dispatched to this address in reference to a phone call complaint. I met with the complainant, Shirley. Miss Shirley stated that she and her daughter has been receiving threatening text messages in reference to an ongoing case in another jurisdiction. Mr. Jared, my wife thought she had to block out his name. Oh, I'm sorry. Mrs. Shirley stated that her 13-year-old daughter is actually her granddaughter, was sexually assaulted and that the accused individual is in jail. She stated ever since the individual was arrested, his father-in-law, who wasn't my father-in-law, me and Taylor were never married. I hadn't talked to Jared in over a year since moving home. His father-in-law was a subject by the name of Jared, who is a subject by the name of Jared, has been sending her granddaughter, is what he meant, Lily, threatening text messages. Miss Shirley stated she sent Mr. Jared the following message on February 11th, 2016 at 1:34 in the afternoon. You need to stop contacting us. If you continue, we will proceed with a harassment complaint. Do you understand, Mr. Jared? Do you understand? It should have been a question mark there, but he put a period. Apparently, Officer Samuel was a dipshit. Mr. Jared responded back at 5:29 p.m. stating, quote, "You do what you need to, but I will find the one I need to, and when I do, her lying will come to an end." Had I been told that Jared or Randy or anybody else was out there calling fucking Lily of all people or her grandmother or her mother and saying this shit, I would have lost my fucking mind, right? Even the first week or two in jail, especially later on. Like, had this happened a year and a half into the case, I've been sitting there in jail early on, doesn't really matter. Like, I knew from the beginning, nobody needs to be talking to her. I even remember telling Kayla, I wish you could reach out to her and say, hey, why did you say this? Because her and Kayla were close when we all lived in the same house, right? She even said that. She spent all her time in the living room with Kayla and the baby. But I told Kayla that was a horrible idea. I never asked Kayla to do it. Kayla never did it. Jared fucking did, and apparently Randy did, because this isn't the only fucking report that was made of this type of shit happening. So he said her line would come to an end. Miss Shirley stated that she was advised by Detective Langley, the detective working her granddaughter's case, to contact her local police department if she or her daughter received any harassing messages from anyone in reference to this case. This officer made contact with Mr. Jarrett around 2015 hours this date on the same day. He admitted to sending the text messages. However, he stated he's never been told not to contact the complainant or her daughter, which is true, which is why he didn't get arrested, because nobody ever said that he couldn't. Now, obviously, had they had phone calls where I'm telling Kayla to tell Jared, or I'm telling Jared, or I'm telling anybody, hey, contact her and tell her this, they would have charged me with intimidation of a witness, and they would have used that shit at my trial. They would have added charges. There would have been a whole thing. But again, I don't even know about this until after my fucking trial is over, well after, a year or two after. It was like 2019 or 2020 before I even touched this, right? This packet here that I turned into a PDF, because my packet again has handwriting all over every page. I still have it though. So he had never been told not to contact the complainant or her granddaughter, is what it's supposed to say. I advised him of the message sent by the complainant where she said, stop contacting us. And his message appeared to be the response to the message advising him not to contact the complainant or her granddaughter. Mr. Jared stated that his message was not a threat, stated he only meant he wanted to talk to the complainant's granddaughter to get her to tell the truth about his son-in-law. Now, I can imagine this toothless fucking pillhead doing all this. And again, I kind of jest at it these days because it's just remembering Jared. I don't even know if he's alive at this point. I would be surprised if Jared and Randy were either one alive, but I don't know. I explained to Mr. Jared that she didn't have to mark out Jared, but she did, that the request of the complainant and her granddaughter, that at the request of the complainant and her granddaughter, he was not to contact either subject by text message, email, phone, or any other means. Okay, so you would think that, all right, that shit's gonna stop. Nope. Whole nother police report, fucking 3 months later, more than 3, almost 4 months later. Whole nother police report. So subjects, they're even listing me in this, essentially. Jared, Randy, and then you got Shirley and Frank, the victim, suspect. I'm listed as other just because they're doing this on my behalf. Not at the request of me. Never at the request of me. This is before they even turned over any of this paperwork that we've gone through to my lawyers. They have all this. They have these reports. This, I don't know when it got added, because my lawyer, my paid lawyer that gave me my discovery pack, did not give me this. He did not tell me about this. I'm telling you, I had no idea about this until after I got out of jail. But again, here's the second report, like 3 or 4 months later. Now, Jared and Randy are both fucking calling and texting, I think. On 4/8/16, I met with Shirley and Aaron in the lobby of the Duluth Police Department in reference to harassing communications. They, who reside at this address, stated they had been the victims of harassing communications and texts from at least 2 people, Jared and Randy, that were known to them from a previous relationship with Aaron. So Randy and Aaron were dating, right? They weren't at this point, obviously. And an incident involving the molestation of Aaron's juvenile daughter. Excuse me. They just put L in her last initial by the son-in-law of Jared, Stephen Shane Q. Rose. Me. Excuse me. They, that's her last name, stated that about 2 years ago, LF was sexually molested by Shane Quiros. I guess you forgot to mark out that last initial, right? In Clayton County. Mr. Quiros is currently incarcerated in Clayton County, and the investigating officer is Detective Jennifer Langley. There's her information. I'm not blocking that out. Fuck her too, right? I don't even know anything about her at this point. I've not looked at any of these people. I put all these people in the past. Yes, I do First Amendment activism. This point, I haven't made the trip down to Clayton County. I do plan on it, but I plan on spending a couple days down there when I do. Actually, I haven't been in Clayton County since I was released from jail. Actually, so they stated that on 2/11/16, the last report that we just read, they had called Duluth and Police Department in reference to harassing communications from Jared. That was the case number. Shirley had received messages from Jared. Shirley texted Jared back and told him not to have any more communications with her. Officer Samuel also spoke to Jared and advised him not to contact Miss Shirley or any of them anymore pursuant to their wishes. They stated that since that time, they have received numerous texts from unknown numbers and some numbers that might belong to Randy, Jared's brother, and Aaron's ex-boyfriend. On 3 of the numbers from which texts were received, the suspect referred to himself as Randy. The latest text received by both Shirley and Aaron on 4/17/16 stated, on Friday, quote unquote, and quote, I am going to get you, unquote. Like, I never would have been okay with any of this. I'm still not at this point. Again, I'm jesting about it. I'm laughing a little bit about it because I can imagine both of these fucking pillheads doing this stupid shit. But I never would have asked for any of this. I never did ask for any of this. I'm not stupid enough to have asked for any of this, but they fucking did it. And again, I had no idea about this until after my trial was over. So on Friday, I'm going to get you, right? These texts were received from phone number. I just blocked it out. We blocked it out because I don't know whose number it is at this point. On previous texts from this number, the person referred to himself as Randy. Harassing texts have also been received from another phone number and another phone number in which the person referred to himself as Randy. And texts have been received from an unknown person from another phone number. All of these suspicious and threatening texts have referenced issues involving their Shirley, Aaron, and Lily's last name and their case against Mr. Quiros. One of the prior texts reference putting an end to the lies, but their last name. We're not sure if that was referring to Aaron or Lily, as both could possibly testify against Mr. Quiros. They both testified against me, and both of their testimonies were horrible for the prosecution. But anyway, we've talked about that part. Their last name are concerned due to ongoing harassment, intimidation, and threats that they feel are trying to keep them from testifying or pursuing prosecution against Mr. Quiros. Their last name have been in touch with Clayton County DA's office and Detective Langley. Their last name are also hoping to use the threats and intimidation by family members to help keep Mr. Quiros from obtaining bond prior to trial. That didn't happen. They did set me a bond. It was too high for us. They did set a cash bond, but none of this was ever brought up. Right? None of this was brought up at my evidentiary hearing. None of this was brought up at a bond hearing. None of this was brought up at a trial. And the reason it wasn't is because they had no phone calls recorded from the jail from me calling and saying to anybody, hey, y'all get in contact with them. Y'all say this. Y'all should say that. Why are y'all not trying to talk to them? I never asked anybody to do that. And if I did, obviously there would be, record of that, right? But there's not because I didn't and I never would have. But again, I believe that's the last page. Actually, yeah, here we are with the scrolling, and it's not going nowhere. You can believe me if that's the last page or not. You can believe me, whether everything's in here or not. What you can also do is you can file an open records request with Clayton County District Attorney's Office and get this entire case file yourself. The only thing that's going to be different is you're going to probably, I don't think that they would edit all this. I don't think if you, some random person filed an open records request for this case file, that they would do all this retracting. They might, but I doubt it. The most they might retract is her last name, or maybe even her entire name. I don't know. But if you trolls, especially, if anybody wants to challenge me on this, now now that I've put this information out there, and whoever watches this video, however you feel about me from this point forward is your right to. I can't tell you how to feel about this case. I can't tell you how to feel about me. I can't tell you how to feel about me being a First Amendment auditor. I can't tell you how to feel about anything, right? However you feel about me after watching this is on you. And I really don't care, because guess what? I proved to 12 jurors, a detective, multiple detectives who didn't take the stand, a district attorney, my family, and everybody else, that I was innocent. Not only did I ride the fucking lightning like Dee Snider, but I turned down the sweetest plea deal offered probably to anybody ever accused of rape. Go home today. Don't have to register as a sex offender. I turned that down and risked life plus 20 years just to tell my story. I took the stand. You want to challenge me in anything I've said? Pay the $4,000 and get the trial transcripts. Then come back to me with any type of receipts and contradict anything I've said during this live stream. I challenge any one of you trolls that ever come across this, ever watch this. Anybody that's an anti-First Amendment auditor, anybody frauditor, troll, Wrangler, Hezekiah, Kfar, the ones I don't even know about. Do your research. You want to expose me? You want to challenge anything I've said? You want to try to prove any type of lie? You reach out. Hell, I tell you what, depending on who you are, there's probably two of those people I just mentioned I would actually send this unredacted case file to and let them do whatever they want with. But how you feel about me at this point after watching this, right? And sometimes I'm looking directly at this camera because I need you to see in my eyes. I don't give a fuck. Garrett Ogg, all he had was, I got his buddy Emerson fired, my first viral video, right? Then he looked me up online, found out there was an article where I was arrested for these charges, never did any other research. He then, on camera, called me a child molester multiple times to my face and to other citizens of the city that I live in. And guess what? He was fired. But it's his right to feel that way. It was just not his right to voice it the way he did. Now, if you want to make videos, if you want to take this and cut it up, Fraud or Troll or Wrangler or whoever, and skew the narrative however you want to, you go for it. I don't give a fuck. I don't care what anybody does with the information that I've just given you. But the one thing I do is I dare anybody out there to prove me wrong. Do any type of research. Find one receipt where you can prove that I lied during this 3 hours and 52-minute live stream. The challenge is there. Anybody want to take me up on it? If not, shut your fucking mouths. Don't ever call me a child molester again. You definitely wouldn't say it to my face, right? None of you would say it in my face. Garrett Ogg, outside of that uniform, would never have said that to my face. You know why I won't allow anybody to say that to my face? That's not a cop. Yeah, I allowed Garrett Ogg. What did I do when Garrett Ogg said that to me? I confronted him. Because he was a police officer, he got special treatment. A regular citizen comes up to me, calls me any of these names to my face, I'm going to paint the floor with you. But I have no problems with how you feel about me. I have no problems with you making videos about me. Prove me wrong, though. You want to make a video about this? Get a receipt. Prove me wrong. Name one fucking lie. There you go. Look, there's 3 people in here, and there's 2 of them that I know. DG1, L3 Media Group. You haven't seen any haters all night. You're right, because whoever that last person is that's sitting there, maybe it's counting me. I don't know if it counts me or not. Maybe it's not. But whether or not, I tagged a bunch of them in the community post, and eventually Frauditor, Troll, Rainler, they're all going to see this. They can do what they want with this video. Maybe they won't do anything with it. But I remember Frauditor Troll, when he covered the odd video, he alluded to the fact that I was a child molester. He didn't come out right and say it, but he said Odd must have had a reason to accuse me of that, right? Here's the fucking facts, Troll. But, and then one of them, I forget, another Frauditor channel actually came out and, made like memes of Daffy Duck getting shot by Elmer Fudd with his beak spinning around, saying that I was a child molester. He was saying all kind of crazy shit without saying it, but definitely, I would say Frauditor Troll left more meat on the bone to say, maybe, look, I'm not going to accuse this guy, but somebody is. Here's all the evidence. Here's everything they had against me. There's my view from at the time in jail. And if you want to pay $4,000, you can get the trial transcripts and try to prove me wrong about anything that I've said about the trial. Everything I've said tonight is 100% the truth. So there you go. Special shout out to L3. Special shout out to DG1. I appreciate the 2 of you being here to the end. That's 3 hours and 55 minutes that you 2 have been here. I appreciate you. I couldn't ask for more from a couple of people that have supported me for quite a while now. To everybody else that sees this, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. I hope you learned something about me. Again, you're free to feel how you feel, but here's the truth. Until the next time I see a bad cop, expose him and get him fired. Peace out. Where's the end button?